Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Luffy got harem with all Kingdom Princess Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content, and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the UnknownOnePieceFan for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story. Link in the description. Let's start this video. The Straw Hats were cruising on board the Thousand Sunny, sailing the New World. Despite the New World having a reputation of being a sea which is described by an experienced pirate, the warlord Gecko Mariah, as a true nightmare, it seemed fairly calm. The navigator believed this to be one of the calmer parts of the New World, as the weather was fair with only a few clouds. The sun was shining brightly and the weather was all around good. Indeed, it was perfect day for relaxation. Even better yet, the crew was approaching an island which they heard was known as a major shopping center. This made most of the Straw Hats happy for different reasons. Nami to go shopping for more clothes, Robin for more books, though she rarely ever was in a sour mood, Chopper for more medical books and supplies, Usopp and Frankie for their own supplies, Sanji for more food, and of course going accompanying his lovely ladies. Only Luffy, Zoro and Brook didn't seem too enthusiastic about the island. Luffy because the island is boring and the absence of adventure, Zoro because he wanted to sleep, and Brook simply didn't care. I can't wait to go shopping here. I heard it was a hot spot for shopping, and I can't wait to get some new clothes along with ink and paper for my maps, said an enthusiastic Nami. Indeed. I would like to accompany you, Nami-san. And I could use some new books as well as some gardening supplies, replied a cool, collected but obviously happy Robin with her trademark smile. I could get some supplies and spices, said Sanji, and then I could see some fine ladies while I'm at it. Melorines, Sanji said, now with hearts in his eyes and a perverted look on his face. Typical love cook. Che, like any Melorine would ever fall for that curly-eyed dork, Zoro answered Sanji in his typical sarcastic tone when dealing with the dartboard. What was that, you mosshead? Sanji replied, immediately leaving his love mode typical of anything related to the bane of his existence, the Marimo. Nothing. Go back to fantasizing, answered Zoro in a bored voice. Sanji's face was morphed into a comical angry one. Dork, finished Zoro. Arg, Che, forget it. After all, what are the chances of any woman falling for that grass stain? His ugly mug would just scare them away, and he only knows about fighting and swords, either of which ladies like, Sanji countered in a condescending tone. That's it. The dork cook was really going to get it now. Instantly Zoro leaped at Sanji with his two swords out, and Sanji naturally answered back with his legs, and the typical Zoro-Sanji brawl started. Guys, cut it out, asked Chopper timidly. While it was true that the reindeer doctor became much more confident and sure of himself after the 2-year time skip, he was still afraid to get in the way of the monsters Zoro and Sanji. Come on, Chopper, let them be. You know how they are. Besides, what could you do against those two of all people? Usopp said to the little reindeer in an assuring voice. Oh, you're right, Usopp, replied Chopper. And you really become cool, continued Chopper in an admiring voice. Usopp, feeling his ego skyrocket thanks to Chopper's praise, instantly went into Captain Usopp mode. Of course. What do you think I was doing over the last 2 years? Certainly not wasting time. In fact, being on an island where everything tries to eat you certainly does wonders for you. And that isn't a lie, said Usopp in a proud voice. You were on an island that tried to eat you. Amazing, Usopp. Wait, you were lying about all those stories, haven't you? Answered Chopper, first in an amazed voice and then in an accusing one. Usopp, instantly catching on, tried to deflect the blame with more outrageous and obviously untrue stories. But we can get some really good supplies here. I could use some lumber and other stuff to help maintain my super ship, said Frankie, doing his usual silly pose. I honestly have no interest in buying anything, said Brook. Okay then, Brook, then how about you stay and watch the ship then, replied Nami. Yo-ho-ho-ho, I could, but I wish to go out there and see if any ladies would let me see their panties, Brook retorted with blood beginning to drip from his nose. Honestly, I should have thought, Nami shouted in an angry voice complemented by angry eyes and in shark teeth. This is boring. I want to go on an adventure, whined an obviously irritated Luffy who thrilled on adventuring and danger. We can't go on adventure all the time, Straw Hat. We need to get out supplies to remain super, said Frankie. Oh well, I guess it can't be helped. Besides, I can still buy some meat, stated the Straw Hat wearing Rubberman with his usual goofy grin. Typical. It's all about the meat, the crew all thought together with sweat drops. Well guys, the log doesn't set until a few days later, but let's all still be back soon. We don't want to leave the ship alone for too long, and we all have bounties, stated Nami. Okay, the crew all thought together. A few hours later the crew all reunited after their individual errands. It was a pretty successful shopping day, but since they were going to be here for a few days there was no need to rush, or else they wouldn't get to enjoy it. Of course they made sure to buy enough should the Marines, pirates, bounty hunters or any obstacles force them to leave immediately. Currently they were all on board the ship eating dinner. And as usual it was the typical Straw Hat chaos. In other words, Luffy stealing food from everyone else, Sanji trying and unsuccessfully trying to woo Nami and Robin with love-themed foods made specially for them. "Oi Luffy, give back my meat," shouted Usopp. "Yes, Straw Hat, I need to have my food in order to be super as usual." "Having you take my food is totally not super," Frankie also shouted in protest. Everyone who Luffy stole from was also arguing with Luffy, who was laughing as usual, totally oblivious to everything except food. All of a sudden a piece of meat went flying from Luffy's mouth and into Nami, dirtying the new outfit she bought and was wearing and got a big discount on. "What the hell, Luffy?" Nami shouted in a huge angry voice. Instantly the crew knew to watch themselves, as despite Luffy being on the receiving end of the feisty navigator's wrath, it wasn't wise to bring attention onto themselves, for she might just turn her wrath onto them. Even Sanji made sure to be quiet. Robin as usual had her usual gracious smile ever present as usual. "Luffy, you are so dead," said Nami in a deadly voice. Luffy gulped in response. He did not fear anything, not the admirals, not the world government, nothing with the exception of Nami. So dead. "Even being a rubber man wouldn't help you one bit," continued Nami in the same deadly voice. Luffy began to sweat buckets of sweat when Nami continued. "I mean, this was expensive clothes. Do you know how hard I had to fight in order to get this discount?" said Nami. Sanji was silent at first, but upon hearing that Nami had her dress which she had to fight so hard for ruined, instantly put him in his beat the shit up of anyone who makes Nami Swan mad mode. "Luffy, how could you do that to my beautiful Nami Swan? After she worked so hard to get that discount." "I'll kill you, shitty rubber man," said Sanji while comically choking Luffy. "But Nami, Sanji was the one who kicked me and made the meat fly out," answered Luffy. "Don't you dare blame Sanji-kun for this. Sanji-kun would never do anything to hurt me." "He loves women," countered Nami. "Of course I would never do anything to beautiful Nami Swan, you shitty-goma. So don't blame me for your faults," Sanji said, siding with Nami, and because in his mind he believed it to be true. The two continued to beat up on Luffy. "Geez, you always do this. You eat all the food. You drag us on dangerous journeys all for adventure. You damage the ship, make loud noise, and worst of all, you make me use up my money," shouted Nami in an angry tone. "I wonder why the hell I decided to follow such an irresponsible captain," Nami said in an irritated voice. "And you eat all the special food I make for my beloved Nami Swan and Robin Swan. How could you do that to my beautiful ladies? And you make all sorts of noise distracting my Nami Swan from her map making and Robin Swan from her reading," Sanji said, adding his part into it. "It's no trouble at all, Cook-san," answered Robin. "Don't say that, Robin-chan. You don't need to hide your frustrations of this crappy captain. I shall punish him for interrupting your reading," said Sanji in his knight in shining armor mood. The two continued to beat up and pulverize Luffy while continuing their ranting. Meanwhile Luffy didn't know why, but their accusations were really getting to him. Normally this would never bother him because he knew they didn't mean it and did it all the time, but this time was different. He didn't know why it was different, but it was very different from other times. And that made all those insults begin to get to him. "Is that so?" said Luffy with a serious voice. Zoro and Robin instantly picked up on the change in Luffy's tone and mood and wondered what got into him. Well, whatever it was, it clearly wasn't good at all. Nami and Sanji were stuck in their anger tantrums, and the rest of the crew didn't pick up on anything since what is happening is a typical occurrence. Yes, both Sanji and Nami said together. "Then maybe I should leave the crew," Luffy finally said with his hat over his eyes. The crew grew deathly silent. All traces of chaos, fun and life left immediately. Those words did not come out of Luffy's mouth. Those words would never come out of any member of the crew's mouth, much less Luffy's. He's the one who fought the hardest to keep the crew together. When Nami stole the ship, he followed and believed she did not betray the crew. When Robin was taken by the world government, he followed, going as far as declaring war on the world for her. When Usopp left, Luffy welcomed him back with open arms after a true apology. There was no way that the one who did those things would now be the one to leave, and for something so trivial. "Luffy, what did you just say?" said Nami in a shocked voice. "You heard me. If I'm such a bad captain who brings so much problems, then maybe I should leave." "That would solve all of our problems, wouldn't it?" said Luffy in a dark voice. Sanji too was equally shocked. Since when did a little argument go so out of control that one of their own would leave? And that person would be the captain. While he loved his beautiful ladies and didn't care so much for the rest of the idiots, they were still nakama, and to have one of them leave, even suggest it was unthinkable. "Oi, listen here, you shithead, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you better stop saying such stupid things, said Sanji in a serious voice. Hey Luffy, nothing good would come out of being so hostile, and nothing good would especially come from leaving the crew, said Zoro, trying to calm the situation down, sensing early on how Luffy was not reacting the way he usually does. Luffy, please don't go, cried a panicking Chopper. Luffy, said Usopp. Straw Hat, said Frankie, removing his shades. Luffy-san, said Brook. Robin, however, remained silent. However, she along with Nami were the ones most shocked at the words that Luffy said. Both of them suffered great misery during their lives, and Luffy was their shining beacon, their savior who freed them both from their pasts, and gave back their family, and their dream. It is for this reason, along with his love for his nakama, his strong sense of right and wrong, his willingness to help even strangers, and many other reasons, that both of them have strong feelings for him beyond that of the other nakama. Robin maintained her composure, but inwardly she was afraid of what Luffy might do. Nami, however, didn't really get what Luffy was doing, and despite her hidden feelings for him, still was angry at him. First for the clothes, and now her anger took on a new level. You say I cause a lot of problems. Well, if I'm gone there wouldn't be any problems. You say I make you spend a lot of money on meat. But if I'm gone you wouldn't have to spend any more of your precious money on meat. If I'm gone, then you wouldn't have to go on any more dangerous adventures. If I'm gone you get the peace and quiet you want so much. If I'm gone, all the things wrong here would be fixed if I leave. Luffy finished explaining his reasoning. Nami could not believe what she just heard. It was unusual for Luffy to give any sort of logical explanation and argument. Normally she would be impressed for Luffy to have done such a thing if he hadn't done it for the wrong reasons. No matter what reasons there were, no matter how logical the argument is, no nakama should ever leave. And she didn't want to lose any of her precious nakama, especially her captain. Luffy then turned to Sanji, and Sanji made sure to pay close attention to what he was about to say, for what he would say would define the future of the crew. And you, Sanji, said Luffy, I am the cause of your beautiful Nami Swan and Robin Swan not getting any of their special food full of your love. Well, if I'm gone, then you could give it all to them. And if I'm gone, Nami can draw her maps while Robin can read her books in peace and quiet, just like they wanted. Luffy explains his reasoning to Sanji. Sanji, just like Nami, was shocked and impressed by the argument. He would have complimented the boy captain had it not been for the worst cause. Luffy, what's wrong with you? How could you even suggest that? Nami desperately asked. You're always complaining about me being a bad captain. Well, you would have nothing to complain about should I be gone, Luffy said in the same serious voice. And so far you have yet to give me a reason as to why I should stay. So why should I stay when I cause so much problems and I'm such a bad captain? Asked Luffy seriously. Because we're nakama. What other reason do you need other than that? And you're not a bad captain, Luffy. Yes, you're loud, make a lot of noise, drag us on dangerous adventures, make me spend a lot of money on meat, but you're definitely not a bad captain. Nami answered, desperately hoping to calm Luffy down and make him reconsider. Chopper, go give this idiot a checkup. He's giving reasoning that's stupid even for him, and he's talking crazy, Sanji asked the doctor. Unfortunately for the cook, the little reindeer doctor was crying at the thought of Luffy leaving. Zoro remained impassive, but he too was hurting inside. I can't believe this is happening, said Usopp in a sad voice. Me too, bro, replied Frankie, also in a sad voice. I can't believe what I'm seeing, said Brook, also in a sad voice and with no skull joke attached. Robin continued to watch silently as not only was her family started falling apart, but the boy she loved was the cause of it. She would hate and kill anyone who tries to split her nakama up, but she can't do that to Luffy. You have yet to give me a good enough reason to stay, and being nakama this time isn't good enough, said Luffy. Silence. There was only silence as the weight of what Luffy said sank in. Nakama, something that meant the world to him, now isn't good enough. Well, if you're not going to give me a reason to stay, here, Nami. Placing his prized straw hat on her head. Nami took some time to adjust to better to see Luffy. That hat is a symbol of a promise I made to Shanks that I would one day give it back to him as Pirate King. But in order to be Pirate King I must have a strong crew, and since I no longer have that, I can never be Pirate King. That dream is dead. Luffy, Nami said in a hurt voice as tears were beginning to form. Get yourself a new captain. A better one than me. One who isn't an idiot or makes you spend money or makes noise or leads you on dangerous adventures, Luffy continued. Luffy, Nami said, but she could say what she wanted to say. Luffy then turned to his crew. This is it, everyone. Sorry for all the trouble I've caused you, but you wouldn't have to worry about it anymore, said Luffy as he looked at his crew for perhaps the final time. See you all, the last words that came out of his mouth as Luffy left the ship and his crew forever. The crew all followed him in hopes to stop him of making the decision that would ruin the crew forever. Luffy, get back here. Turn around, shouted Nami. Why, get back here, Luffy, shouted Usopp. Please come back, Luffy, cried and shouted Chopper. Straw Hat, don't do this, shouted Frankie, this time not making any use of the word super. Luffy-san, Brook also cried. Only Zoro and Robin maintained their composures, but closer inspection you could see Zoro's hand twitching and see moisture forming in Robin's eyes. However, both did a good job in hiding it. Despite all this happening, Luffy never turned around. The crew could only watch silently as their beloved captain, savior, and friend disappeared before their very eyes. All the Straw Hats thought one thing. Luffy, thought all members of the Straw Hat crew together. It has only been a little while since Luffy left the Straw Hat crew. The crew were all thinking different thoughts about this, but regardless of what they all thought, they still could not believe this was happening. They wished it was all a dream and they would wake up to hear Luffy's annoying yells for meat and adventure. Wake up to hear Sanji kick the crap out of him for disturbing his and his beautiful ladies. Wake up to just being normal. But life was cruel, and even more so a pirate's life. Luffy, one of their own, and their captain had left them. The crew was still feeling the after effects of Luffy's decision. Luffy, cried a sniveling Chopper. Usopp came down to hug the crying reindeer, for once not in a hug of fright but one of comfort. He too was struggling to hold his tears in. Frankie and Brook silently watched as the crew fell apart in grief and sorrow over a nakama. They both could understand why, as they both held Luffy in high regards and his leaving affected them just as much. Zoro was silent during the whole affair. Despite his calm appearance, he too was shocked at the outcome. He had seen Luffy go to great lengths for his crew, and for him to just leave, over a petty argument, he wasn't sure if he would ever trust him ever again. Robin was silent as she tried to be strong. While harboring feelings for her captain, she knew she had to be strong for the crew, because now the crew needed its strength more than ever, since now they lost their strongest person. Next to Robin, Nami took Luffy's leaving just as hard as Robin, even harder. She had feelings for the idiot captain, though she would never admit it, even to herself. But one thing she would not argue with was that she did not want him to go. But he did, and now she began to think that it was her fault her captain left. If she hadn't started that stupid argument, none of this would have happened. Sanji had already bitten down on his cigarette. That shitty captain, how dare he leave this crew? He had a responsibility, and now he is wrecking the crew apart, and making his beloved ladies cry. He knew Luffy was selfish, but this was a new low for him, a low he could never forgive. Well, we should wait for the log to set, said Zoro neutrally. The crew all turned to Zoro, miffed at the fact he doesn't seem the least bit concerned about Luffy leaving. Zoro, damn you, how could you say that? Shouted an angry Chopper. Yeah, you're even colder than those swords you carry. Frankie also shouted angrily. Zoro, what the hell is wrong with you? Can't you see Luffy left? An irate Nami said. The effects of her hero's leaving was more present in her than anyone else. Marimo, you better have some good explaining to do before I kick your ass. The crew is falling apart, and you just stand there talking like it's nothing, said Sanji angrily, who too was feeling like it was his fault Luffy left. Normally he would always admit that siding with the ladies was the right thing, but now he wasn't sure, not when siding with the beautiful ladies meant breaking the crew apart. Shut up all of you, said Zoro in a commanding voice. The crew all instantly got out of their somber and angry mood. Somber for Luffy leaving, and anger at Zoro. We have argued over plenty of things in the past. Over which course to take, how much money we have, who gets what food, many things indeed. But one thing all of us have stayed true to was the fact that the crew should all stay together and help each other no matter what, said Zoro in an authoritative voice. The crew all recognized the seriousness of which Zoro was speaking in. He was using the same tone of voice he used when they were discussing Usopp's return. They knew he was serious, and they had to listen. That was the foundation of the crew. It was something our captain himself founded and was the embodiment of, continued Zoro. He may have been an idiot, but as the captain and founder of this crew he had to strive to be a role model for all his crew members. He had to do anything for his crew and do anything to make sure they all stayed together. Now he, the one who started all this, has turned his back on the very foundations he created when he started this crew. He has not only betrayed us, he has betrayed himself, turning his back on the very things he stood for by leaving the crew he founded. That cannot be forgiven so easily, said Zoro with a serious look in his eyes. The crew all looked shaken but understood the importance of what he was saying. No matter what happened, Luffy should have never left the crew. There is something else, Zoro said, and then paused for greater effect. The group all listened attentively. Luffy is normally an idiot. But when he does say things that make sense, they may not necessarily be right, but they are things he truly believes in. Like when he told Vivi that it wasn't right to not expect anyone to die. Someone else might argue otherwise, but you cannot deny the logic behind it. Makes sense, even if you don't believe it yourself. Likewise with Mariah. Beating him may not have necessarily returned our shadows, but Luffy truly believed it would. Likewise, Luffy explained why he believed he is the cause of all the problems of the crew. He truly believes that he was right, even if he may not have been, explained Zoro. The crew all knew what Zoro was saying was true. When Luffy did make sense, he was usually right, but even if he wasn't, he still believed he was right until proven otherwise, which has yet to happen. I would not allow Luffy to return to this crew unless he offers a sincere apology. When Usopp left, it was the same thing, so it would be no different now. No, it would be different. Usopp may have been Nakama, but he wasn't the captain. Also, when he left because he wanted to keep Mary our Nakama. Also, there was his own insecurities. Those reasons, while not enough to leave, were at least understandable. Luffy, on the other hand, left for reasons which were petty. He left over arguments that in the past never bothered him. An apology is needed from him, or else there is no place for him, continued Zoro. A captain who is willing to abandon the crew so easily will only make the crew fall apart, Zoro further declared. The crew all looked down, knowing he was right. Luffy is my captain too. I too was affected, said Zoro in a much more vulnerable voice, and in that moment, two memories came back to both him. Zoro remembered losing badly to Mihawk, and then crying to Luffy that he would never lose again. Him, the monster, the demon, was crying. Also, he remembered giving his life for Luffy when Kuma came to capture him. For the same man Zoro cried and nearly died for, to just betray him like this. He too was hurt. Sanji likewise at the same time remembered those two memories and knew that the swordsman would be affected just like everyone else. With the exception of Nami and Robin, he may have taken this the worse, perhaps even more than himself. It's interesting that despite all their bickering and fighting, their minds were connected by those same two memories. However, Zoro was the first mate, and he needed to step up to keep the crew together. If Luffy truly believes he was right, then even if he does come back, he may not apologize. If that's the case, it would be best to leave him on this island, Zoro said. But Zoro, pleaded Nami. No buts, retaliated Zoro. Nami looked like she wanted to argue but kept silent. Nami-san, let it go, said Sanji in a consoling voice. Me and the Ma said may not agree on many things, but what he is saying is right, finished Sanji. The log sets in a few days. If Luffy was indeed angry, then a few days should be enough for him to blow off his steam. When he comes back, he should be in a calmer state of mind and apologize. We have a few days, so we'll wait, finished Zoro. The crew all agreed and decided to wait. The mood was somber, having lost their shining beacon, and things were more mechanic, done as if simply to keep a sense of normalcy, not out of sheer joy or fun. They waited for a few days, and on the last day their tensions were at an all-time high. It was the last day, and they waited for Luffy to return. This would be the last chance they would get for the boy captain to rejoin, but Luffy never came. The crew reluctantly left to continue sailing the further seas without their captain this time. A month later, in a vast fortress, a young man wearing a green cloak and typical revolutionary attire was walking into a large throne room. Inside that room, 10 figures all in green cloaks, all in typical revolutionary attire, were present, and in front of them, sitting on the throne, was a large man also wearing a green cloak with dark clothes. Monkey D. Dragon, Monkey D. Luffy and 10 members of the Knights of D were together. Next chapter, the official debut of the Knights of D. There are 12 members. Luffy and the other 10 make 11. There is a final 12th member who will surprise all of you. This is one of, if not my favorite chapters, so please review and let me know what you think. I'm more inclined to write. Welcome to the Knights of D, my son, said Dragon in a proud voice. Thank you, father. I am happy to be here, and I would serve you till death, replied Luffy. Well said, my son, said Dragon in his proud voice. But still, it's hard to believe that this scrawny kid is actually one of us. Never mind that he is Lord Dragon's son, said Hannibal. Do not underestimate him. He is Lord Dragon's son after all. He carries the blood of the strongest through his veins, Electra said. Even before he awakened the will of D, he has performed some incredible feats like taking down a warlord Crocodile quickly, Yuri said. Crocodile was a weakling. Trash like him isn't worthy of joining the revolutionary army and fighting for our great cause. Defeating him is a simple affair. Anyone who can use hockey can do it. Hannibal countered. But he invaded all 3 of the world government strongholds, and even declared war on the world government to save Nico Robin, the light of the revolution, said Monroe. She was only given that name to gain her trust. Her sole purpose for being the light of the revolution was to make it easy to form an alliance with Luffy, since he was so determined to become Pirate King and stay with his crew. Making him join the army would have been impossible, replied Sabo. The O'Hara incident and her ability to read the poneglyphs was simply used to make it all the more convincing for her to join. Anyone who has awakened the will of D can read the poneglyphs, since it is the language of our ancestors, so naturally we can all read it. Lord Dragon, who is the strongest alive along with Pirate King Gold Roger, can read it best. And Luffy, who recently awakened it, could also read it. Nico Robin was not needed for that reason. Simply to make it easier get Luffy on his side, Sabo continued. But since Luffy came to us willingly, asking her to join was completely unnecessary. Of course we would have rescued her anyway since we are revolutionaries and she was a slave and Tequila Wolf to build a bridge for the world nobles, Electra finished. I still find it hard to believe Robin was with you, father, said Luffy, genuinely surprised. That was quite something. In fact, she would have made a fine addition to the army given her background. She obviously cannot join the Knights of D, but she would fit perfectly into the army masses. But she was hard to locate, so we couldn't find her. We would have taken her in had we known, said Dragon. I'm glad to know that there are people out there that would have helped her. I wish she met you guys sooner. She suffered a lot, said Luffy. The Revolutionary Army is about freedom. And she was denied it for a long time. The same thing with your navigator Cat Nami. Had we known what was going on in East Blue, we would have went and helped. It would also increase our influence into the East Blue, for despite it being the weakest sea of all, it produces some of the greatest people in the world. Yourself, myself, your crew members and Gold Roger are prime examples. It would be a strategic move to rescue it had we known, answered Dragon. But I don't like the idea of you guys talking about using Robin for anything. Even if you rescued her and wanted to get to me, said Luffy in a serious tone. Well, I still find it hard to believe he's one of us, said Hannibal. Again, he is AD, and Lord Dragon's son. Besides, after he awakened the will of D, to help him harness it, it was required he fight each of us and his father. You cannot deny how quickly he mastered it, and how strong he is, Kanka answered Hannibal. I see. You certainly have a good point. Despite not winning all the battles, he certainly gave a truly magnificent fight worthy of his name, Hannibal said, having to agree with what Kanka said. The feats that he has achieved in the past as a pirate, the fact that he is AD and Dragons on to boot, his great strength and charisma, he certainly is worthy to be one of us, Jupiter said. He may have all that, but there is one more, countered Sambai. What? Asked Jupiter. Commitment to Lord Dragon's cause. It is one of the most important aspects of the Revolutionary Army, and especially for a Knight of D. You have to be completely devoted to him, and Luffy-kun tends to be a bit rash and acts of his own judging by his past, Sambai said wisely. We all have that issue. But in the end we still are Lord Dragon's greatest followers, Jupiter countered. Everyone listen, shouted Luffy. I may have only been a revolutionary for a short time, but I am completely devoted to him. He took me in when I left the crew. And unlike the crew, he forgives me for my faults. Despite all that, he trained me and taught me to harness the power of D. And I hate the world government. They killed Ace, they killed my mother, tried to kill my crew, made Hancock suffer as a slave, made Bonchan suffer and impelled down, did nothing to help the fishmen and mermen of Fishman Island get along with humans. I hate them and would do anything to see them burn in hell, said Luffy in a passionate voice. Luffy, Sambai couldn't help but say. Of course you're a fishman too. So naturally that part would affect you, Scorpius said. Luffy would not betray us. He may act on his own, but he is completely loyal to us. His speech and his past along with his resolve proves it, said Dragon as a matter of fact. Shooting his hand up in the air he shouted, Monkey D. Luffy! Knight of D, shouted Dragon with his hand in the air. All the remaining Knights of D followed suit and shot their hands up in the air. This was concluded with Luffy shooting his hand up. The Knights of D led by Monkey D. Dragon, the greatest of Revolutionary Army, and the group that would bring the world government to their knees. A few hours later Dragon was walking in the corridors when a large individual stood in front of him. Quite the character, isn't he? Said the stranger. Indeed he is, Teach, said Dragon. Blackbeard of the Four Emperors wasn't dressed in his usual pirate clothes but instead in Knight of D attire. Marshal D. Teach, also known as Blackbeard, is the final member of the Knights of D. Say ha, I met him in Mock Town, and it was easy to tell he was something. And when I saw his wanted poster, it made sense. He was your son after all, said Blackbeard. Well, it was a good thing you didn't capture him at Mock Town, or else things would have gotten complicated. I'm glad I got to you to stop you from pursuing him any further, said Dragon matter of fact. Well, even if he was your son, he was not with the army, so I didn't think you would mind, said Blackbeard. There is no cause to be upset. It is understandable. In the end, no harm came to him. Besides, you have done well in helping in my master plan to bring about the end of the world government, and those who oppose me, said Dragon. It is something. I mean, first you approached me and asked me to join your army in exchange for training me in awakening the will of D. Then you give me the darkness fruit. So what I had to do was somehow hand over Ace to the world government, which would prompt them to go to war with Whitebeard. The resulting battle would significantly weaken the world government regardless of whether they won or not. That would make it easier for the Revolutionary Army to crush them in the future. Explained Blackbeard on Dragon's plan. You would have me kill both Ace and Whitebeard should either survive the war. Of course Ace didn't survive, so that wasn't necessary, but Whitebeard sure did. Ace is the son of my mortal enemy, the man I admire and hate the most, Gold Roger. Since Ace is that man's son, he would never join me. In fact, just like his father, he would soon oppose me. And I'm positive he would awaken the will of D with time. He needed to be taken out, and Whitebeard had to be taken out for you to be an emperor. Dragon continued where Blackbeard left off, and then as an emperor I would seize all of Whitebeard's territory and make it our territory. It would make it easier for the Knights of D to move. Of course the rest of the army, even the commanders, cannot take advantage of this since they all think they are my territory when in reality, they are yours. I got Whitebeard's devil fruit as an added bonus. It helped because it made the world think I killed him for his devil fruit, not to expand the influence of the Revolutionary Army, said Blackbeard. But it was really tough. I mean, I had to fool everyone into thinking that I wanted to be Pirate King, not to mention they all think I killed Thatch to get his devil fruit, when in reality I already ate the devil fruit I wanted. I decided to give the fruit to one of my nakama, and I had to tell Ace that I was pursuing his little brother for the warlord title. It wasn't necessary, but it certainly made sure Ace would fight, continued Blackbeard, though being a warlord was a nice bonus. It made getting into Impel Down and recruiting new crew members a lot easier. As well as sneaking into Marineford. Things just seemed to be going my way completely, exactly as I wanted. Finch said Blackbeard. Everything seems to work in our favor, even the unexpected, said Dragon. Now that my son is here, I have everything I need to conquer the world government, and make the D the rulers of the world the way it should be. Said Dragon. The world government has only 2 Admiral-class fighters, Fleet Admiral Akainu and Kizaru, along with the 7 warlords. That means 9 enemies in total. We on the other hand have 12 fighters, each capable of battling Admiral or Emperor-class enemies. If somehow the world government formed an alliance with the 3 remaining Empereros, no matter, they would have 12 fighters against our 13. We still have the advantage. But we would still possess the greater power. Then there is myself. My power is on par with, no greater than Roger's. We may have been equally powerful back then, but that was 20 years ago. I am much stronger than back then. I alone can kill them all. Finally there is our trump card, the ancient weapon Uranus. The colossal super sea king that obeys only me. Said Dragon. No matter how you look at it, we win. We would trample the world government and anyone who gets in our way, continued Dragon. Nothing would stop us, finished Dragon. Quite a lot revealed, huh? I really enjoyed this particular chapter. My favorite actually anyway. Some notes. The Knight of D attire consists of the typical revolutionaries' clothes with green cloaks similar to dragons. Also a note on devil fruits. I believe they don't affect clothes. Remember when Luffy turns small when he goes gear 3rd, his clothes shrinks to match. If stretch, his clothes would stretch to match. If a Zoan Knight of D transforms, the clothes wouldn't be destroyed. All the new guys are Knights of D, so they all are Ds. About Robin. Dragon only called her the light of the revolution to make her feel as if she was important to them when she wasn't. It made it easier to trust Dragon. The true goal was so that when Dragon would ever approach Luffy for an alliance, Robin would spread a good word and influence Luffy to do so. Dragon knew Luffy was too committed to his crew and becoming Pirate King to join the army, but an alliance should be fine. However, since Luffy joined on his own, asking Robin to come was a complete waste of time. About Dragon's plan. Well, it was a long-term plan similar to Aizen and Toby. Basically, Dragon found Teach, who was already part of Whitebeard's crew, and offered to train him and give him the dark fruit in exchange for becoming a Yonko and helping the army. The fruit Thatch got was in this FIC an unknown one. He just said it was the dark fruit to fool everyone. He already ate the fruit. He only killed him so that Ace would pursue him, knowing Ace's code. The fruit was given to a random member of the Blackbeard Pirates. When Luffy and Teach met in Mock Town, Teach was truly after Luffy. Since Luffy wasn't part of the army, he didn't think Dragon would mind. However, after Luffy escaped from him to Skypiea, Dragon intercepted him and ordered him not to go after Luffy. During his battle with Ace, he only said he was going after Luffy to make sure Ace stays on his tail. Dragon wanted Ace gone because Ace is Roger's son. Roger and Dragon have history which would be revealed in due time. Since Ace is Roger's son, Ace would never join him. In fact, he would oppose him, so Dragon wanted to get rid of him at once. He could have done it easily, but Ace was under Whitebeard's protection. And despite Dragon being much stronger than Whitebeard, he still does not want to challenge Whitebeard directly. Handing Ace to the world government achieves 3 things. First, it makes it easier to kill Ace with the whole war going on. Both Dragon and Teach know that Whitebeard would go to war with the world government to save his sons. Secondly, the war with the Whitebeard pirates would weaken the world government, and the Whitebeard pirates to the point where Teach could kill Whitebeard himself and Ace should he escape, as well as allow Teach to steal Whitebeard's powers. It wasn't exactly guaranteed that Teach would become an emperor, but he has 2 devil fruits, knows Whitebeard's territory, and killed an emperor, so Dragon was confident he would become one. Finally, it would significantly weaken the world government, so the revolutionary army could take over in due time. It made the seas more chaotic, thus forcing the world government to spend more resources on it on a long term. Finally, Luffy does not know about Blackbeard being a revolutionary. Dragon kept that secret, which is why he was absent when the rest of the Knights of D were pleased. The time is near, said Dragon. Time for what, father? Asked Luffy. Time for what? Isn't obvious. Time to invade Mariewa, replied Dragon. Already, father? Asked a perplexed Luffy. Why, yes, Luffy, confirmed Dragon. Truth be told, I wasn't expecting to have the invasion of Mariewa this soon. In fact, the invasion wasn't supposed to take place for several more years, but you joining certainly speed things up, explained Dragon. I am very selective when it comes to choosing members to be part of the Knights of D. Each must have great power, BAD, have all 3 types of haki, and have awakened the power of D. Each of these requires luck, as you should know, continued Dragon. It's really tough finding people who meet each of these. And even if they do, they need to have the most important thing. And I believe you know what that is, said Dragon. Be loyal to you, your army, and your cause, answered Luffy, immediately knowing that this was the most important aspect. Not just for the Knights of D, but for all members of the Revolutionary Army. I wasn't expecting to find another candidate to become a member of the Knights of D so soon. And I certainly wasn't expecting it to be you of all people on this world. I was at Louchtown to see if there was a possibility, but I could immediately tell that would never happen, said Dragon. So to think that you would join my army of your own free will. Even now it still surprises me, and you already met quite a few of the requirements to be a member of the Knights of D, and I fully believe that you would be able to awaken the power of D since you are my son. And despite being here for only a short time, your loyalty was certainly with me, continued Dragon. But even if you were the perfect candidate to become a knight, I still did not expect you to become a member so quickly. It takes years to master the power of D. You achieved it in just a few weeks. That is the fastest of any D in history, including myself and Roger. Not only that, I thought it would take years for you to become loyal enough to the army for the rank. Yet it took a few weeks. Truly, I did not expect things to go so well, finished Dragon. Thank you, father. But it was thanks to your training as well as the battles with the other knights that I was able to become this strong. Sure, I was brought to the brink of death several times, but in the end, it was worth it. I am no strong enough to serve you and help you crush the world government, answered Luffy. Well said, Luffy. Spoken like a true knight of D, replied Dragon to Luffy's speech. Anyway, your joining occurred at the perfect time. You see, this year is the World Governance Council of the Kings, also known as Reverie, said Dragon. Reverie, what's that? I think I heard about it a few times back on Fishman Island, but I can't remember what it is about, asked Luffy. It's sort of a gathering of major figures of the world government. It takes place every 4 years. Important people from all over the world would be gathering there. Kings, princesses, politicians, and other high-ranking people from different islands, cities, and kingdoms would be present to discuss world affairs. We are going to invade during this year's reverie, explained Sabo, just entering and joining the conversation. Welcome, Sabo, glad you could make it, said Dragon to the most powerful member of the Knights of D. Greetings, Lord Dragon, Luffy-sama, greeted Sabo politely in his usual monotone, aloof voice. You too, Sabo, greeted Luffy back. Well, as I was saying, many high-ranking officials would be there. The Gorosei and the Tenryubito should be there as well, further explained Sabo. Those heartless bastards. The ones who ordered the destruction of Robin's homeland and made her life hell. And those stuck-up bastard Tenryubito. If they are going to be there, I want to be there as well to kill them all, said Luffy in an angered voice, with haki beginning to leak out. Of course, both Dragon and Sabo were not even fazed by Luffy's haki, as both are powerful, experienced warriors of D, so neither were intimidated the slightest. Furthermore, with so many high officials present, it's only natural that they would have high protection. Because of that, many vice-admirals would be there as well. Also, Admiral Kizaru, Fleet Admiral Akainu, and World Government Commander-in-Chief Kong would be there as well, explained Sabo. Akainu, that bastard who killed Ace. He is the one I want to kill the most. Hey Dad, Sabo, during the invasion, I want to be the one to kill Akainu, said Luffy in a deeply angry and hateful voice while clutching his from feeling his scare throb at the mention of Akainu's name, and the prospect of killing him. At the same time, hateful haki was coming from him. We can't make any promises. Akainu is the fleet admiral for a reason. He earned that position by battling an admiral-class enemy for 10 days straight. And since Akiji was an admiral at the time, he had great mastery over haki, which made it even harder for Akainu to defeat. Whoever faces Akainu during the invasion will have to go all out and fight with the intention of killing him, explained Sabo. The Shichibukai are also given invitations to come and serve as bodyguards, but it is optional, and usually all of them except Kuma ignore it, said Sabo. Kuma, thought Luffy. What is it? Asked Dragon. Well, Kuma did save us back at Sabati Archipelago. So I wanted to thank him for saving me and my crew, said Luffy in a soft voice. Dragon and Sabo both had their eyes shadowed. I see. Well, that makes sense. But it wouldn't make that much of a difference. Kuma is a full pacifista, a complete human weapon. He no longer has any free will of his own. You would have trouble thanking him because of that, said Dragon in a soft voice. But I still wanted to thank him, said Luffy. Both Dragon and Sabo were silent for a moment. Very well. But only if you see him first. It is all-out war, so the knights would not be holding back, said Dragon with a regretful tone. Luffy himself had his eyes downcast. However, said Dragon suddenly. At this Luffy quickly perked up. I would have the knights try to avoid Kuma to give you the opportunity. Sabo, can you handle that? Asked Dragon to the leader of the Knights of D. It shall be done, Lord Dragon, answered Sabo in a respectful tone. One more thing, father, asked Luffy. Luffy then paused for the next question because it was one he needed to know. Will Alabasta and Ryuga Kingdom be there? Luffy asked the question. Both Sabo and Dragon narrowed their eyes and had serious looks on each of their faces. It was known that Luffy defeated Crocodile, and saved Alabasta Kingdom, and became good friends with Princess Vivi in the process. Also it was known that Luffy defeated Hody Jones, saving Ryuga Kingdom, and also became good friends with Princess Shirahoshi, the current reincarnation of the ancient weapon Poseidon. Simply asking about those two showed that Luffy still held deep loyalty to his Nakama despite swearing allegiance to the Revolutionary Army. Of course it was a curious question, and they needed Luffy, so they decided to answer. Yes, both Alabasta Kingdom and Ryuga Kingdom received invitations to attend this year's reverie. So it is likely that King Nefertari Cobra and Princess Vivi, both of Alabasta, along with King Neptune and Princess Shirahoshi of Ryuga Kingdom, would be present, answered Sabo with his eyes narrowed and keeping a sharp eye on Luffy. Vivi, Shirahoshi, thought Luffy, who began to reminisce on the memories he had with the two. I see, said Luffy finally after a few moments. Also Luffy, one more thing. We still have time before the invasion of Mariewa, so I have a special mission for you, said Dragon. What is it? Asked Luffy. I want you to kill Big Mom, Dragon stated. Big Mom, you mean the Emperor of the Sea? That is correct. I believe that after you saved Fishman Island that you would have some issues with her. So I figured it would be best to send you, Dragon said. Luffy then remembered the events of Fishman Island, and how Big Mom was willing to destroy it because of some candy. She was willing to kill Shirahoshi, Hachi, Kami, Papug, Neptune, the Neptune princes, and all the people because of some candy. He then remembered how he declared war on her, and how he'll beat her in the New World and make Fishman Island his territory. Of course, the way he is now, he obviously can't make Fishman Island his territory, but he can still protect the people of Fishman Island by killing Big Mom. I'll do it, father, said Luffy with steel and finality in his voice. Very well, you are expected to leave immediately, said Dragon. Of course you are needed for the invasion of Mariewa, so you'll need to finish Big Mom, be back here and completely healed for the invasion, so you have a fairly narrow time frame to work with. Can you handle it? Asked Dragon. Yes, answered Luffy with an affirmative nod of his head. We still have quite a bit of time before Reverie actually takes place. During that time, a few loose ends are needed to be tied up. One of which is the execution of Big Mom, said Dragon. Like what? Asked Luffy. Just some loose ends, nothing for you to worry about, replied Dragon. Well, for now, you focus on your mission. Go, ordered Dragon. Okay, said Luffy as he left. When Luffy was gone, Sabo and Dragon continued to converse. Despite being very loyal to the army, he still clearly is attached to his Nakama, said Sabo, voicing his concerns. Well, that is true. But in the end, his loyalty to us exceeds his loyalty to his Nakama, rebuked a confident Dragon. Still, he clearly cares for them. That might be a problem, said Sabo. That's true. But I don't think it would become that big of a problem unless we actually harm them. As long as we are not responsible for them getting hurt, he should remain loyal to us," said Dragon. "And if it comes down to one of us harming his nakama?" asked Sabo, voicing the million-dollar question. Dragon was silent for a moment. "I suppose we would have to do what needs to be done. We are so close to conquering the world government. We cannot have anything stopping us right now," said Dragon. "However, if we do harm them, we must make sure at all costs that Luffy does not find out about it," said Dragon. "Of course we'll try as much as possible not to harm," finished Dragon. "Very well, my lord," said Sabo in a respectful tone of voice. "Anyway, it's time for the cleansing to begin," said Dragon. "I see," said Sabo. "There are clearly a few revolutionaries in the army who would not approve of an assault on Mariewa, and would try to stop us. They would have to be killed," said Dragon. "Ivankov is one of them. That freak would be more interested in protecting the subordinates than achieving our objective. He too would have to be disposed of," said Dragon. "What about Luffy?" asked Sabo. During his break into Impel Down, Ivankov was a major ally of his. "If he dies, Luffy would surely not react well," said Sabo. "We'll make sure he doesn't find out. Tell him that the world government found out where he was and sent a force to kill him. His Nukama friends were also killed trying to protect him. Notify Monroe of the Knights of D. Have him kill Ivankov and the rest of those idiots on that Nukama country," said Dragon. "As you wish, my lord," said Sabo in his usual respectful voice when speaking with Dragon. "Also, Red Hair Shanks and Kaido would have to be disposed of. Both are threats to us ruling the world. Even if we destroy the world government, both would still oppose us. During the War of the Best, Kaido tried to attack Whitebeard to seize power. Red Hair was able to intercept and stop him. He might try to use the destruction of the world government to seize power. He would have to be killed," said Dragon. "And Shanks is even more dangerous to our cause. Shanks is one of Roger's former nakama. As a result, he knows all about the power of D. Also, he witnessed my battle with Roger, meaning he knows of my abilities. Having seen Roger fight with the power of D many times, he knows all about it, including how to counter it. Likewise, he knows of my devil fruit powers, so he'll know how to fight me. He too knows the true history and the location of Uranus. Furthermore, Shanks was Roger's student, making him my enemy as well. He is currently one of my most dangerous enemies, and he would definitely oppose me, so he would have to be taken out," stated Dragon as a matter of fact. "Shall I take him out, my lord?" asked Sabo. "No, I have a better idea. I'll have Teach kill him instead. There is clearly history between Shanks and Teach, and I know that right now Teach is strong enough to kill him," said Dragon. "You plan to have Teach kill Shanks in order to avoid Luffy suspecting that we would be responsible for Red Hair's death, correct?" said Sabo, seeing what Dragon was planning. "That is correct. Luffy already has bad history with Teach over his capture of Ace. He would certainly believe that Teach or Blackbeard would do something like kill Shanks," said Dragon. "And Luffy would believe that Blackbeard did it to get one step closer to becoming Pirate King or something similar, not because you ordered it," said Sabo. "That is correct. Teach was chosen to kill Shanks not only because of his history with Shanks, but because Luffy would never question as to why he did it, nor would he suspect us. As a result, he would never find out," said Dragon. "It certainly would be disastrous if Luffy found it," said Sabo. "Indeed it would," said Dragon. "Not to mention, Luffy would be able to channel his rage at Shanks' death along with Ivankov's during the invasion of Mariewa. As for Kaido, well, you could handle him," said Dragon. "Yes, my lord," said Sabo. "I'll order the rest of the Knights of D to be prepared to purge the revolutionary army of its traitors or those who would not support our cause. In the meantime, you are ordered to kill Kaido of the Four Emperors," said Dragon. "Very well, Lord Dragon," answered Sabo. Dragon then got off his throne with his cloak flowing. "Let the cleansing begin," said Dragon. Another bombshell chapter. Well, as usual, some notes and explanations. First, on Teach killing Shanks. I know a lot of you wanted to have Luffy kill Shanks because you are interested in the meeting between Luffy and Shanks and how it would turn out. But Luffy is still loyal to his nakama, and still loyal to Shanks, despite him being very loyal to Dragon. He just wouldn't be able to bring himself to kill Shanks. If Dragon ordered Luffy to kill Shanks, then Luffy might become enraged that his father ordered him to kill his friend and idol, and he would leave the army. Dragon doesn't want to take that chance. So instead, Blackbeard would do it. Luffy would easily believe that Blackbeard would kill Shanks just for power, and instead want to kill him, not knowing he did it under orders of his father Dragon. Shanks is dangerous to Dragon. Since Shanks is a former crewmate of Roger, Shanks knows about the power of D. He has seen Roger use the power of D many times, so he knows a lot about it. So it is likely that he would know how to counter it. Also, he has seen Dragon fight a big battle with Roger, so he knows about Dragon's devil fruit powers. So he knows about both of Dragon's sources of power, the devil fruit and the power of D. So he'll know how to fight and ultimately kill him. Shanks also knows the true history if you recall the Straw Hat's conversation with Rayleigh at Sabbaty Archipelago, and the location of the ancient weapon Uranus. Also, because Shanks was close to Roger, he would never support the army. In fact, like his ex-captain, he would oppose Dragon. So Dragon needs Shanks dead. He can't get Luffy to do it since Luffy holds him in high regard, and doing that might make Luffy leave the army. So Blackbeard would do it instead. They have history, so he's perfect. The fight between Roger and Dragon. I did say that there was an epic battle between Dragon and Roger. I wouldn't reveal much, but I would say that it was different at Garp's battle with Roger. Roger saw Garp as a rival and friend. Dragon, on the other hand, I would tell you is by far Roger's strongest and greatest enemy. They do look about the same age. Both are extraordinarily powerful and, as seen so far in this story, have almost opposite personalities. Roger is carefree like Luffy was, and Dragon cold and manipulative. Roger versus Garp would be pirate versus marine. Roger versus Dragon, on the other hand, would be good versus evil. I'll reveal the nature of this colossal battle later. Reverie. Well, I did hear in the Fishman Island arc that Reverie is supposed to take place this year. So I figured it would be the perfect time to invade the Holy Land. More importantly, Vivi and Shirahoshi would be there. This would set up the fateful meeting between two of Luffy's girls, Vivi and Shirahoshi. Also, the fact that many big people would be there would allow the Revolutionary Army to showcase their terrifying power. Not to mention all the important people are in one location, so it is the perfect chance to kill a good chunk of their enemies. About the high security at Reverie. I just made that up. I figured for a big event like Reverie where so many important people are gathering, naturally they would have beefed up security. So I believe that quite a few Vice Admirals, Kizaru, the Fleet Admiral Akainu and Commander-in-Chief Kong along with the Gorosei would be there all at once. So basically this would be the best opportunity to take out the world government. Kill the emperors first. The emperors are a threat to the Revolutionary Army, each for their own reasons. Big Mom and Kaido might use this to seize more power, and Shanks will always be an enemy to Dragon. So they have to be taken out. Also, the Emperor's death would make the Reverie more important, since the death of 3 emperors would cause the world government to panic and bring everyone together at Reverie to try and tackle the situation. About Luffy seeming a bit softer and OC. Well, he had to be OC for the story to work. So sorry about that. And if the time skip was too long, it would mean Reverie has already passed, and the Straw Hats would become too strong if the time skip was too long. Also, I didn't want him to appear heartless or too cold. I wanted him to still care for everyone. I just don't see how he could have a harem if he is completely cold-blooded. Luffy mastering the power of D in a few weeks. Well, Luffy basically created Gear's second right after seeing CP9 perform Saru, and the time skip between that and invading Enies lobby was just a few hours. So in a few hours, Luffy basically invented Gear's second on the spot. Not to mention that Rayleigh said that 2 years would not be enough for anyone to master just one type of haki. Luffy, on the other hand, in a year and a half mastered all 3. Let's face it. Luffy grows extremely fast. Dragon finding it tough to find another Knight of D. Well, the requirements are you must be extremely strong, have all 3 types of haki, be a D and awaken the power of D. Each requires luck, so to have all 4 is just hard. Truth be told, Dragon wasn't expecting to find another knight in years. But he did not expect Luffy to join the army, the invasion taking place so soon. Well, if I had to wait for Reverie in another 4 years, all the Straw Hats would be too strong for the knights. Also, Dragon stated that it took years to master the power of D. Dragon wasn't going to invade until Luffy was ready. Luffy was ready in just a month, and it was close to Reverie. In other words, Luffy was ready at the perfect time. I know a lot of you want to see more Straw Hats. But this is a war, so I'll need to move between the Straw Hats and the knights. Don't worry, the Straw Hats will get their time. Sanji will definitely react to the death of Ivankov and the Nukama. Usopp would react to the death of Shanks, thinking his father might have died too. Also, the Straw Hats should know that Vivi and Shirahoshi would be at Reverie, so naturally they would be interested. They will be concerned that Vivi or Shirahoshi were hurt. Dragon is evil. He now orders the killing of his own men. Trust me, the story would reveal even more evil things about him. He is the main bad guy and the strongest. His devil fruit is the Storm Fruit. Storm Fruit, ability to create and control storms and storm elements at will. Wind, clouds, rain, thunder, lightning, tornadoes, snow and hail, they all answer to him. It is a Paramecia type and probably the most overpowered in this story. I'll reveal more later. Luffy killing Big Mom. Well, Luffy did declare war on Big Mom. This way he is still kinda helping his crew. It will also make things more interesting during his inevitable confrontation with Shirahoshi. Finally, a review wanted to know if I was adding Margaret and Makino. Margaret maybe, Makino no. Makino seems to already have a child judging from a cover. Also, I want the harem to consist of girls that were really helped or saved by Luffy. Nami was saved from Arlong, Vivi's kingdom was saved, Robin was freed from the world government, Shirahoshi was freed from Vanderdecken and her kingdom saved, and Hancock, while was not really saved by Luffy, is in love with him. These women would take Luffy's dark side much worse than others who do not know him so well. Margaret, while close to him, was never saved by him, and never seemed to have feelings of love for him. Though she did have an obsession with his testicles. So Makino definitely no, Margaret maybe. You decid. That's the captain for you, said Lucky Rowe, the fat crewmate. The chances of this guy ever turning down a party is the day I'll retire as a sniper, said Yassop, father of Usopp and sniper of the Red Hair Pirates. Che, like that'll ever happen. I'd definitely sooner say that you'll retire as a sniper than Shanks turning down a party, replied another crewmate of Shanks. Ha ha ha, no way in hell would I ever turn down a party, replied Shanks. See, told you, said the same crewmate. Shanks continued partying, laughing and generally having a good time when all of a sudden I felt a feeling take over him. He couldn't describe this feeling, but he could definitely say that it wasn't a good one. He could pass it off as just a fleeting thing, but Shanks was no rookie. He was an experienced pirate who traveled with the greatest pirate ever, the pirate king Goel Roger, as well as now currently one of the 4 emperors of the sea. Experience told him that this feeling was a sign, an omen that something bad was going to happen. He learned a long time ago, perhaps from his mentor Goel Roger, along with his years of experience both with the late Pirate King along with his own crew, that you cannot ignore these feelings. These feelings are as important to a captain as a log pose is to a navigator. It is what steers you on the right path, and right now these feelings was telling him of something really bad happening. This was followed by a physical feeling in 2 places. The first was on his lost arm where he sacrificed it to save Luffy. The second was on his scarred eye, which had 3 scars that were given to him by Blackbeard, who right now was equal in rank with Shanks. The feeling in his eye told him that whatever was going to happen, Teach was going to be related somehow. Likewise, the feeling in his left arm suggested that something was happening to Luffy, and it was big. But he couldn't understand why he would have both of these strange feelings together. However, right now he couldn't do anything about it. Beckman, Shanks' trusted first mate, noticed the change in his captain's demeanor. Captain, are you all right? Said a concerned Beckman. Shanks immediately left his brooding upon hearing his crewmate and first mate. Yes, sure, I'm fine, said Shanks with a reassuring smile on his face. Yassop and Luck Rowe, both veterans of the Red Hair Pirates, also noticed their captain's change in behavior but chose to do nothing and move on. Everyone decided it was best to drop the subject and continue partying as usual. Nonetheless, Shanks and his more veteran crewmates kept their guard up because they knew that Shanks felt something, which meant that they must be on their guard. However, there was no need to panic some of the newer or weaker crew members, so they decided to continue the party. This party was indeed what people would call the calm before the storm, and indeed that was the perfect description for the event, as they were greeted by a most unpleasant visitor. The newest and arguably strongest of the 4 emperors, the Blackbeard Pirates, led by Marshal D. Teach, also known as Blackbeard of the 4 emperors, and secretly member of the dreaded Knights of D. Say ha ha ha, how nice to see you, Red Hair. You are looking as good as ever, said Blackbeard in his usual pompous and condescending voice. Same to you, Teach. Indeed, same to you, replied Shanks with his eyes extremely sharp and his sword in hand. Likewise, his crew also had weapons in hand and were prepared to fight. The scene was almost identical to the previous confrontation between the Red Hair and Blackbeard Pirates 2 years ago at Marineford. You are looking as good as always. Tell me, how is that eye of yours? Said Teach, poking fun at Shanks' scarred eye. It's the same as when I first got it from you the day we fought, and I can still feel it twinging at your very sight, said a serious Shanks, and if you look closely you could indeed see it twinge. Say ha 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 ha, well, that is to be expected. After all, it is probably the only scar you ever got in battle that has yet to heal and probably never will, said Teach, continuing making references to Shanks' eye. Shanks narrowed his eyes as he could feel his eye continuing to twinge. In fact, it was twinging even more now that the War of the Best at Marineford 2 years ago. Enough games. What are you doing here, Teach? No, Blackbeard, said Shanks, finally getting to business. Say ha 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 ha, as hostile as ever, Red Hair. The way you are right now, Shanks, is the same as you were 2 years ago when we last met. The same look in your eyes and sword in hand. This really is déjà vu, said Blackbeard with his usual attitude. We are both emperors of the New World. And you know that any emperor who comes into the territory of another emperor without permission is equal to a declaration of war, and I doubt I would ever give you permission to enter my lands. So again, what are your intentions for showing up here? Said Shanks with his voice raising. No need to get all hostile there, Red Hair. After all, we have so much history. We were both formerly part of two of the greatest pirate crews in the world. We both are emperors and we both had quite a date, didn't we, on that day? We are a lot alike. Where's your love? Said Blackbeard, whose confidence and arrogance had not wavered a bit upon hearing Shanks' serious voice. We are nothing alike. You betrayed your own crew. You killed one of your own crewmates, turned another over to the world government for power, and murdered your own captain in cold blood. You are the worst scum out there. You and me, Blackbeard, are nothing alike. Now for the last time, what do you want by coming here? Stated Shanks with steel in his voice. There you go again, trying to deny the truth. You of all people should know how tough it is to become truly the greatest in the pirate world. It is merciless to those who lack the conviction to do what is necessary to obtain power. You have to do what you must in order to become truly great, said Teach, who finally started talking about something serious. I killed my crewmate Thatch and stole the devil fruit he found. Then I turned over Ace to the world government, so that I could become a Shichibukai. Using the privileges granted to those who obtained the title of Shichibukai, I was able to get access into Impel Down to recruit new crewmates. I believe you already met them back at Marineford. Also, I was able to kill me ex-Captain Whitebeard as well as steal his devil fruit powers. I am the first person in history to have 2 devil fruits. I have some of the world's most heinous criminals as my subordinates, and conquered all of Whitebeard's territory. Thus, as a result, I became a member of the 4 Emperors of the Sea, and that much closer to becoming Pirate King. I did what was necessary to become what I am today. You too had to do what was necessary to become the great pirate that you are. You know this to be true, said Blackbeard, explaining his actions. Shanks listened to his explanation too, with his eyes shadowed by his hair. It was clear to everyone, even those who didn't know him personally, that he was in a seriously bad mood and took what Blackbeard said personally. So that's it, huh? That's it. All the terrible things that you've done. All the pain that you've caused. All the people, both pirate and marine alike, who lost their lives during the war 2 years ago. All that was because you thought it was necessary to achieve power and become the Pirate King, Shanks said in a low voice with his eyes still shadowed. The whole world knows what I did. But do they know the truth? Do they really know what happened, or just what they read in the newspaper? Said Blackbeard in a cryptic yet still arrogant tone. What do you mean? Replied Shanks, who was now confused. The world knows I defeated poor Gas the Ace, or should I say Gol the Ace, and handed him to the world government, becoming a Shichibukai in the process. The world knows I entered Marineford and killed Whitebeard and stole his devil fruit powers, becoming the first person to have 2 devil fruits. The world knows that I became one of the 4 Emperors of the Sea. But do they know the whole truth? The truth of what really was going on with when those events transpired, continued Blackbeard. Damn it, what the hell are you trying to say here, Blackbeard? Said Shanks, who was becoming more confused by the minute. Likewise, his crew were equally confused. A few tense moments to add even more tension to the suspense that was currently going on. See, ha. Fine, I'll tell you the truth. You see, everything that I have done so far was under orders of a higher power, said Teach, finally releasing the bombshell. Silence. That was all that was present. It is incredible how the atmosphere can change so drastically with the utterance of a single phrase. The phrase higher power was enough to change the entire complexion of the whole confrontation. Not just this one, but the whole new age that they were currently in after the Golden Age, which ended with Whitebeard's death. The War of the Best was one which indeed changed the world. 3 warlords were lost, Blackbeard, Mariah and Jinbe, along with the death of an emperor. Indeed, it was a war which changed the world. And now Shanks and his crew just found out that the man who manipulated the entire war was working for someone else. This was too much for everyone, especially Shanks. The entire crew, especially Shanks himself, was in a state of shock after hearing this. What do you mean, Blackbeard? Are you saying that everything you did was because someone ordered you to? Shouted a still perplexed Shanks. That's right, Red Hair. Everything I did was under orders of my leader, said Blackbeard. Everything I done was under his orders. Defeating Ace and handing him over to the world government, which would prompt Whitebeard to go to war with the world government to save his nakama. And then entering the war and killing Whitebeard. Even taking the title of emperor. Everything was because I was ordered to, said Blackbeard. Of course, some things I did on my own. For example, killing one of Whitebeard's crewmates was done specifically to get Ace to follow me. Telling everyone I wanted to be Pirate King was also my choice to make everything easier. Likewise, getting the Shibukai title simply made things easier to carry out his orders. I honestly didn't care about it nor even needed it to begin with. It did allow me entrance into Impel Down as well as made sneaking into Marineford easier. Also, getting Whitebeard's power was a huge bonus. Continued Blackbeard. Of course, you entering and stopping the War of the Best was suspected by my leader, who knows you somewhat, so he ordered me not to engage you. Honestly, I wouldn't have engaged you anyway if I was given a choice. However, if he did order me to fight you, I would naturally, said Blackbeard. So who is this leader you speak of? And how does he know me? Asked Shanks the most important question. Oh, it is someone who you are very familiar with, said Blackbeard. Then with a maniacal look on his face he finally said, Monkey D. Dragon, leader of the Revolutionary Army. That name was met with reactions from every one of the Red Hair pirates. Monkey D. Dragon was the most infamous and most dangerous figure in the world, even more feared than the Pirate King. If Roger was the pinnacle of pirates, then Dragon was the pinnacle of all those who opposed the world government. Dragon is so feared that he is known worldwide as the world's most wanted man. In fact, he is more wanted than Gol Roger himself, when he was alive. All the members of the Red Hair crew had gasps on their faces. But the one with the biggest reaction was none other than Shanks himself. Dragon, said Shanks with his face in a scorn. Memories of that dangerous man came back to Shanks like a movie projector. Shanks could still remember that man. How so extraordinarily powerful he was that the Roger pirates thought he was a god. How he came so close to killing his former crew, his captain, and destroying the world by attempting to awaken the ancient weapon Uranus. However, Roger was able to stop him. However, Roger wasn't the type to kill his enemies, which was why he let Dragon live. The mere mention of that man's name is enough to send a chill down his spine, which is something considering that as one of the 4 great pirates of the New World, nothing should scare him. I knew the moment I heard his name that he was the leader of the Revolutionary Army, and from reading in the newspapers that his full name was Monkey D. Dragon only confirmed that it was the same guy from 20 years ago, said Shanks with an extremely hateful look on his face. The moment I heard he was alive, I knew I would have to do something to stop him. But as leader of the Revolutionary Army, he was mostly liberating countries from the world government and freeing people from slavery. He didn't seem to be doing anything bad. I thought his defeat at the hands of Captain Roger changed him for the better, so I never bothered. It looks like I was wrong, but to think he was doing something as big as manipulating a whole war, that just seems crazy. At the same time, I'm not surprised considering it is him of all people. Something like this is something he would surely do. Not to mention it's possible for a man like him, said Shanks. I guess I shouldn't be surprised that you're working for him. I mean, it really took me by surprise when you said that you were working for someone like you who has 2 of the strongest devil fruits and are one of the 4 emperors. For someone as strong as you to be working for someone else, that person must really be somebody extremely strong. But now finding out that it was Dragon, it doesn't surprise me one bit. Extremely strong is an understatement to describe that man. He was equally as strong as Captain Roger, said Shanks. Equally as strong as Roger. Zihahaha. How wrong you are. You see, they may have been on par with each other. But that was 20 years ago. Lord Dragon has gotten much stronger since then. He is now the strongest being in the world, said Blackbeard. Shanks could only grit his teeth knowing that Blackbeard was right. And that meant that even if he wanted to stop Dragon, at this point he couldn't. Especially now that he had an entire army backing him. Teach, seeing the despair on Shanks' face, couldn't help but taunt him even more. Zihahaha, I bet now you wish you hadn't saved Luffy's life and gave him your straw hat. After all, he is the son of your captain's greatest enemy, said Teach in a taunting voice. Luffy may be Dragon's son, but he is not Dragon himself. He has done nothing wrong. He is not like Dragon, said Shanks in a firm voice. Oh, is that so? Well, you see, things are different now. He is no longer the little boy whom you gave your hat to, said Teach still in his taunting voice. You're right, he is not. He is now a man who will return my hat to me and become the king of the pirates. You wouldn't know since you never wanted to be king of the pirates to begin with, said Shanks, countering Blackbeard's statement. Zihahaha. I wouldn't know. I know more than you think. You see, I am a member of Dragon's greatest fighters, the Knights of D. And guess what? Luffy is one of them, said Blackbeard. The look of utter horror was seen clearly on Shanks' face. He could not believe what he just heard. The boy who begged to join his crew and swore to become the king of the pirates was now not only allied with Blackbeard, but a subordinate of the most dangerous being in the world. Just what has happened to him? He kept track of Luffy's whereabouts through the newspapers, and now he finds out that Luffy is one of Dragon's men. Granted, he is Dragon's son, and a son would naturally want to help his father, but this, giving up his dream, abandoning his nakama for a man who once ruled the world. He recently read that his crew, the Straw Hat Pirates, recently became active again, and now he's hearing that Luffy is now with the Revolutionary Army serving under his father. Just what happened in just a month? No, Luffy wouldn't do that. He loves his crew and wants to be the Pirate King. He wouldn't just abandon all that to be part of Dragon's group, said Shanks with a serious voice. I don't know exactly why he chose to leave his crew, but it is no longer important. He is now one of Lord Dragon's elite warriors. And furthermore, Lord Dragon has helped him awaken the will of D, said Teach. The look of shock was apparent on Shanks' face. He knew how powerful the will of D was, having seen his captain harness its power many times to overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. To think that Luffy would awaken this ancient and powerful bloodline like Roger. Then again, he shouldn't be surprised. Luffy was always capable of amazing things, and even though he didn't want to admit it, was Dragon's son, who himself was a master of this power, if not the greatest master of this ability. And if he was with Dragon, then it would make sense that Luffy awaken it and master it quickly. Despite being incredibly disappointed in Luffy, he couldn't help but feel proud that the boy had come so far. If only he wasn't on the wrong side, then he would have certainly made Pirate King with his new powers. You know, despite how I'm feeling hearing that the little anchor is now on the side of evil, I can't help but feel proud of the brat, said Shanks, smiling for the first time. What? Asked a confused Teach, whose smile and cocky attitude left him immediately. Why the hell would Shanks be happy about what he just heard about Luffy? It's really strange. I mean, I find out that the boy whom I was willing to even sacrifice my arm for to achieve his dream has given up on it. And even worse, he gave up his dream to help a being whose purpose in life is to destroy everything. But still, I am happy the brat has come far. Even since I met him, I knew he was just like Captain Roger. He was just like him, even more like him than his own son Ace, whom I met before. And he certainly had more in common to Captain Roger than his real father, that bastard Dragon. And now that he has awakened the will of D, he is now even more like him. Yep, he is certainly going to become the Pirate King. I know it, said Shanks with a real smile on his face. Blackbeard, on the other hand, was not smiling. He expected Shanks to react badly, but he didn't expect this. He didn't expect that despite what he told him, Shanks still believes that he would become the Pirate King. I just said that he is now a revolutionary, specifically a Knight of D. There is no way in hell that he would want to become the Pirate King now, said Teach, trying to break Shanks again. No, you're wrong, he would become the Pirate King. He just needs some talking to. Or perhaps some sense knocked into him. And guess what, I would be the one to do it, said Shanks with a determined look on his face and his smile never leaving him. And I need to kill your leader for trying to tempt my little anchor into betraying everything that he holds dear. Besides, as Roger's student, I have a duty to my captain to finish the job he started. Not to mention I do have a score to settle with you for what you did to Anchor's brother and Captain Roger's son, said Shanks. Teach was not happy, not one bit. This confrontation started out exactly like he wanted. He would wear down on Shanks' spirit by revealing his true motives. He hoped that also telling him about Luffy would dampen his spirit even more. The result would be that Shanks would be significantly easier to kill. Instead, it had the opposite effect. Shanks' spirit became stronger upon hearing about Luffy. This fight would be far more difficult than he thought. This was not happening. But nonetheless, he had his orders to complete, and he would do so. Well, I think it's time I answered your earlier question. You know, the one about why I'm here. Well, the answer is that Lord Dragon has ordered me to kill you, said Teach, his smile still gone. Well, that's great. Because I wasn't going to let you live in any case. Not after all the terrible things you did under Dragon's orders. And now I want to kill you even more for bad-mouthing Luffy like that, said Shanks with a confident smile plastered on his face. I'm going to kill you, Teach, finished Shanks, his smile completely gone and his haki flaring violently as if saying you'll be burned. His crewmates were also in fighting positions. You can try red hair, finished Teach as darkness began to envelop him and a transparent bubble appeared on both his hands. The Blackbeard pirates were also in fighting positions. Later that day, Shanks was on the ground. He was just defeated by Teach. Teach, however, was full of injuries himself. He was hoping to avoid this. He was aiming to break Shanks' spirit, but that backfired and made him stronger. So strong that Teach honestly thought he was going to lose. The two fought a huge battle with their respective crews, one that would be remembered for ages. Despite a valiant effort on Shanks' part worthy of a member of the 4 Emperors of the Sea, he was defeated. Teach himself had to struggle in this battle like he has never struggled before. It was his toughest fight yet, one which the more it dragged on, the more he felt he was going to lose. Nonetheless, he won and Shanks laid on the ground defeated. Shanks, heavily wounded and on the verge on death, began looking up in the sky. He began to reminisce on all the good memories he had, all the fun times he had with the Roger pirates. Arguing with Buggy, getting bonked in the head by Rayleigh, training with Roger, drinking and partying with his nakama. Battles upon battles that made the crew more than just a crew, it made them family. Captain Roger, Rayleigh-san, Crocus-san, Buggy, guys, thought Shanks, smiling from the memories of his first crew. He then began to think about his own crew, their adventures and good times. He remembered his frequent duels with Mihawk, where the two fought and become both rivals and friends. He remembered Yassop, Beckman, Lucky Rowe, all of them made him the great pirate that he was today. They were his family. Ben, Yassop, Rowe, Mihawk, everyone, thought Shanks, remembering his second crew. The last memory that crossed his mind was one of his most cherished. A memory he held dear. One which he made in Windmill Village. The memory of a small boy who reminded him so much of his captain. I'll form a crew of my own on day, Shanks. And I will become king of the pirates some day, said an enthusiastic 5-year-old Luffy. Ha! I see then, in that case, said Shanks, who proceeded to take off his hat. He then gently placed his hat on the little boy's head. You see this hat? It's really precious to me. I want you to take good care of it for me. And return it to me when you become a great pirate, said Shanks with a gentle smile on his face. Shanks' ship was leaving, but he continued to look at the crowd, specifically the little boy who was in the arms of a woman named Makino. The little boy was crying while he held the hat in his hand. I want you to return the hat to me in good condition. When you become a great pirate, said Shanks in his mind, as and Luffy continued staring at each other. As the ship began distancing itself to the port, the two continued to have their eyes fixed on each other, as if in their own little world. We'll meet again too someday, Luffy. And when we do, you'll be the king of the pirates, said Shanks before the ship was out of view. Little Luffy, who was still crying, couldn't take it anymore. I would do it, Shanks. I would definitely become king of the pirates. You'll see, shouted a crying Luffy. With his back turned, no one could see the tears falling from Shanks' eyes as he smiled. Captain Roger, you would definitely be happy if you saw this, though, Shanks. Shanks was finally back to the present, as his eyes were now tearing from all the wonderful times he had. Luffy, I know that you are struggling. Dragon has manipulated you to do his bidding. But I know you, Luffy, you'll pull through. You'll definitely become king of the pirates, thought Shanks as tears were spilling from his eyes. My one regret is that I wouldn't be alive to see it happen, thought Shanks, thinking about his one regret. Luffy, everyone. Thank you, though, Shanks with a smile on his face as he finally collapsed from his wounds. It has finally happened. Red Hair Shanks, captain of the Red Hair Pirates, formerly a member of the Pirate King's crew and member of the 4 Emperor of the Sea, was dead. The rest of his crew looked on, all of them crying at the loss of their captain and friend. In another part of the New World, Monkey D. Luffy, son of the revolutionary leader Dragon and the Libra of the Knights of D, was currently pursuing Big Mom of the 4 Emperors of the Sea. He was ordered to kill her. While traveling, he got a strange feeling. A feeling as if someone was touching his shoulder. He looked behind and saw no one. Yet for some reason he couldn't help but think of his mentor and friend Shanks. Despite having cast aside his past upon joining the Revolutionary Army, he still held his precious people in high regards. Shanks included. Shanks, thought Luffy, though he didn't know why. Nonetheless, he had to continue his mission to kill Big Mom. As a member of the Knights of D, failure wasn't an option. Yet still on the way he couldn't help his mind from wandering to Shanks. There is it, guys. The latest chapter. Well, first, I know a lot of you are getting frustrated that you haven't seen any of the Straw Hats yet. I mean, this is One Piece, and One Piece is about the Straw Hats. But this is the final war, so again I'll have to give all the necessary characters their due. Next, about if an emperor goes into another emperor's territory without permission is a declaration of war. I just made this up. But it would make sense. I mean, 2 of the strongest pirates in the world in the same place. Something is bound to happen. Also, when Shanks came to Whitebeard, Whitebeard knew Shanks when he was a brat, and knew he wouldn't just come here for a fight without good reason. That's why there was no way between the two. Continuing on, the first part of this chapter was more or less the calm before the storm. A party before a dreadful event happens, and this dreadful event would be the battle between Shanks and Teach, which result in Shanks' death. About Shanks' feeling. Well, Luffy does have a sixth sense for danger, and since the series emphasizes the similarities between Luffy and Roger and Luffy and Shanks, then Shanks should have a similar sixth sense for danger or terrible events. Blackbeard taunting. Well, Blackbeard does have a habit of conversing with his enemies, even extremely strong ones, which is what he was going here. A lot of Blackbeard actions during the war were not necessarily Dragon's orders. For example, Dragon simply told Teach to hand Ace over to the world government. He never said how. Blackbeard was the one who came up with the scheme to kill a crewmate and have Ace pursue him, knowing Ace's code. Also, certain things were just bonuses. Dragon simply wanted Blackbeard to turn Ace over to the world government, prompting the Whitebeard pirates to go to war. And then in the middle he would kill Ace because he is the son of his mortal enemy, and Whitebeard to become a Yonko. Becoming a Shichibukia wasn't necessary for the Whitebeard pirates to go to war. Turning Ace over was all that was needed. Breaking into Impel Down and getting new crewmates was not necessary to kill Whitebeard. But both made his job easier, as the Shichibukai title would make getting into Impel Down easier and sneaking into Marineford easier. Getting new crewmates would bolster his crew but wouldn't affect Dragon's plans. It would, however, make his crew stronger and thus more of a competitor to becoming an emperor, as well as by extension make the revolutionary army stronger. Also, stealing Whitebeard's devil fruit was not necessary, but it was a bonus. It would make him stronger, and thus more likely to become an emperor. And him becoming stronger would naturally mean the Knights of D are stronger. Again, most of his actions were not necessary but optional. Dragon suspected Shanks would enter the War of the Best, knowing him from Roger's crew. So he ordered Teach not to engage him. Of course, Teach knows how strong Shanks is, so he wouldn't have fought him anyway unless specifically ordered to by Dragon. So the nature of the battle between Dragon and Roger is finally revealed. Dragon attempted to unleash the ancient weapon Uranus onto the world. But Roger was able to stop him, however he didn't kill him. And now Dragon is back stronger than ever. Roger didn't kill him for more or less the same reasons Luffy doesn't kill his enemies. Shanks didn't pursue Dragon at first because of what Dragon was doing. Dragon was already defeated by Roger and prevented from unleashing Uranus. Also, Dragon was doing things like liberating lands and freeing people from slavery. He was doing anything bad, so there was no reason for Shanks to pursue him. In fact, because of the things he was doing were good things, Shanks thought Dragon turned over a new leaf. How wrong he was. I'll definitely agree that the reason was weak. However, it's tough to write up any sort of argument which would make Luffy leave the crew of his own free will. I mean, if it's blackmail, then yeah, that could work. But to make Luffy really leave, that is hard. I once had a good reason for Luffy to defect from the crew, but I already used it up in my other FIC One Piece Shippuden. I just cannot think of another. You could check it out if you want. I think you'll agree it's definitely better than this one. The argument is not the basis of the story. The basis is the war. The argument was just needed to get the plot forward. Like a catalyst, the story does not revolve around the argument. If it was, then the story would be a hurt/comfort one, not an adventure one. I know Luffy is someone who gets yelled at a lot, and should take it personally, but it is hard to write about any real conflict between the Straw Hats. Zoro respects Luffy, that's true. But during the discussion of Usopp's return, Zoro did say that he would leave the crew if Luffy lets others step over him. And that is what Luffy did. He let Nami and Sanji step over him and left. The guy Zoro respects even nearly died for at the hands of Kuma just left over such a petty reason. Why should he defend such an individual? Nami and Sanji not apologizing. They do feel regretful, and they might have apologized had he returned to the crew. He did not, so they obviously cannot apologize. I know a lot of people joined the crew specifically because of Luffy, but I do not see them as the type of people to just give up if one member leaves, even if it's their savior, or whatever. If one does leave, they would try to get that person back. If the person doesn't want to come back, they'll have to move on. When Usopp left the crew, they were able to still function though depressed and L. What is it, Robin? Found something interesting, said Frankie. Yeah, Robin, what is it that could have you calling for all of us? Asked Usopp. What is it, Robin-chan? Asked Sanji in a flirting voice, though not exaggerated by his usual heart-shaped eyes and useless love poetry. You're not going to believe what I just found in the papers, said Robin in a serious voice. Well, what is it, Robin? Said Nami, also curious as to what could have her Weni-sama like this. Sanji, seeing Nami in a curious mood, couldn't help but throw a love line at Nami. With a perverted look on his face, Nami-san is beautiful when she is curious. Seeing this, Zoro couldn't help but throw his line in. Stop being such a perverted arrow cook. And that wicked witch of the sea is only ever really curious about money, said Zoro with a bored look. Hearing this, Sanji couldn't help but leave his love mode whenever his nemesis Zoro ever said anything. You said something, seaweed, said Sanji in his usual rude and challenging voice whenever talking to Zoro. I said that you're a perverted arrow cook. What's the matter, wax in your ears, replied Zoro, ready to take the cook on. You better watch what you say, Marimo, before I kick your ass, said Sanji, ready to make good use of the skills he gained on Okama Paradise. Zoro was silent for a moment before he replied. I think I'll back down this time, said Zoro. Sanji, however, was shocked. Since when does the muscle freak ever back down from fighting him? What? He said in a shocked voice. You heard me. I think I'll back down. After all, I don't want all your germs from flirting instead of showering come onto me. That's why you have all that wax, said Zoro in a bored voice. Sanji, however, gritted his teeth. Of course it was something like this. He should have expected as much. Sanji was ready to start a fight when he suddenly stopped. Che, like you're one to talk. All you do is lift weights and sleep all day. And with all that sweat nonetheless, said Sanji, countering Zoro's argument. What? Shouted Zoro with a comically angry face before the two went into an all-out brawl before it was violently interrupted courtesy of Nami's fist. That's enough from you two, said Nami, who had her fist smoking. Likewise Zoro and Sanji were both on the floor with huge bumps on their heads. Anyway, continue Robin, said Nami, turning her attention to Robin. Ah! Shouted Sanji. What is it, Sanji-san? Said Brook, looking around. I forgot, you called Nami-san a wicked witch of the sea. I'll kick your ass, shouted Sanji. All the Straw Hats had sweat drops on their heads with the exception of Zoro, who was battling Sanji as per usual. Both were knocked out again and had second bumps on their heads, this time not from Nami, but from unexpectedly Chopper. That's enough, you two, shouted Chopper. The crew all looked at Chopper strangely. Meanwhile Chopper, who just realized what he had done, went immediately nervous, thinking Zoro was going to chop him up and Sanji was going to cook him. Arg. What have I done? Now I'm gonna die. I don't wanna die, shouted Chopper hysterically while running around. That's alright, Chopper. You were wonderful, said Robin in a soothing and grateful voice, both to compliment him for his deed and out of gratefulness for stopping the distraction. Anyway, continue Robin. And none of you better interrupt her, said Nami in a warning voice. Well, as I was saying, the newspapers had several articles, but two of them were really big. Both have worldwide implications, said Robin in a serious voice. So what are they, Robin-chan? Said Sanji, now generally curious. 3 of the 4 emperors of the sea were murdered, said Robin, finally letting out the bombshell news. What? Shouted all the crew members. Here's the article, everyone, said Robin as she read the newspaper article to everyone. 3 emperors. Dead all at once, said Usopp, shivering. The 4 emperors of the sea are the 4 strongest pirates in the world. Just one of them dying is big. And you're saying not 1 but 3 of them were killed, said Frankie, who couldn't help the sweat coming down his face. Anyway, Robin, which 3 exactly? Said Zoro, who too was intrigued at this serious development. Red Hair, Kaido and Big Mom were all murdered in the same time frame, answered Robin seriously. That's just hard to believe. The emperors were supposed to be extremely strong. To think that 3 would be killed so quickly. Whoever did it must be unbelievable strong, said Sanji, whose cigarette has left his mouth since hearing the news. Robin, said Zoro, calling out to the archaeologist. What is it, Swordsman-san? Replied Robin. You said that they all died at the same time. I don't think that is coincidence. Someone must have planned to have all 3 of them assassinated at the same time, said Zoro. I drew the same conclusion, said Robin. It would suggest that there were 3 parties involved with the murder of the emperors. Or could have simply been 3 people who individually murdered each emperor, said Robin ominously. But it's really scary. If what you say is true, then there are 3 people out there who are strong enough to kill an emperor, said Nami, who was scared out of her mind. She believed that after the 2 years of training that they would be able to handle any obstacle, but even she did not believe that they could handle an emperor, yet much less 3 people who could kill one. Everyone, what do we do if we run into any of those guys? Said Brook, voicing a question that everyone subconsciously thought about. I'm scared, you guys, shouted a scared Chopper and Usopp. The crew was all silent. Normally they would be perfectly willing to handle any enemy who comes their way, but even they were not too sure about this new and obviously dangerous threat. Despite their training for 2 years, even they were reluctant to face not 1 but 3 foes whose power exceeded that of an emperor's. We'll run, said Zoro seriously. What? Shouted the crew again, as the thought of Zoro, member of the monster duo now that Luffy is gone, would suggest running. What did you say, Marimo? Said Sanji, who was shocked that his rival, who was a monster, would suggest running. Normally I wouldn't. But this is an enemy that is too much for us. Even with our training, I don't think it would be enough to take on whoever these guys are. Especially now that Luffy's gone, said Zoro, stated the reason for his decision. The crew had to agree on that one. Luffy was their strongest fighter, and now he's gone. In fact, the crew always believed they would come out on top specifically because of Luffy's strength and determination, and now that he's gone, the crew just didn't feel they could take on someone like that. So they agreed that running would be the best choice. We'll run, but if we're concerned or have no choice, we'll fight, but that's only if we have no choice, said Zoro. That would probably be the best decision. said Robin. But this is something that would really change the world now. The Emperors is one of the three great powers of the world that maintain stability. Just losing one of them would plunge the world into chaos, which is what happened when Whitebeard died. And now 3 of them are dead. The world would probably never be the same after this, said Robin. The rest of the crew knew this to be true and knew that the world would never be the same. Then Zoro remembers something important. Oi Robin, isn't Shanks also known as Red Hair of the 4 Emperors? Asked Zoro, even though he knew the answer already. Yes, he is, answered Robin. And Shanks was the one who gave Luffy his hat. Then continued Zoro, who did not wish to finish the sentence. However, he didn't need to finish it off, as one thought crossed all of the minds of the Straw Hats. Luffy thought all members of the crew. Oh my god, Luffy, cried Nami, whose hand was covering her mouth. Luffy really admired Red Hair, and he was the one who gave him his straw hat, said Robin, whose hand was on her, and you could see tears forming in her eyes. Luffy, said Usopp, who too was crying. Luffy, cried Chopper, who was never one to hide his emotions. Zoro, Sanji, Frankie and Brook all had their heads down thinking about Luffy and what he was going through now. First his brother Ace, now his friend Shanks. Is there no end to it, said Sanji, who too was pained at what Luffy must be going through. Despite his actions at making Luffy leave and always beating up on him, even he didn't want this. Straw Hat, what are you going through? Said Frankie, whose voice was soft unlike its usual supertone. Luffy-san, said Brook, who is intimately familiar with the pain of loss. Zoro was silent, but if you looked closer you could see the sadness in his eyes. He, like everyone, knows that Luffy is suffering incredibly, having lost 2 people dear to him. Zoro really wished that Luffy never left the crew, that way he could be here where he belongs and where he could be supported by his crew. Robin, said Usopp timidly. Yes, Longnose-kun, said Robin, who was still grieving over Luffy. I don't want to sound selfish over what Luffy's going through right now, but what about my father Yasopp? He is a member of the Red Hair Pirates, so what about him? Asked Usopp, wanting to know about his father. Wiping away the tears, Robin answered Usopp. No, it's alright, Longnose-kun. Anyway, the article listed not only the emperors themselves, but also important subordinates of theirs who were also killed. Your father's name wasn't in the article, so for now we could assume that he's alive, said Robin. Usopp couldn't contain his tears. First there was the tears from finding out Luffy's pain, and now the relief that his father might be alive. Thank God, was all Usopp could say. The rest of the crew couldn't help but smile. They were happy that they were able to at least avoid one tragedy befall their nakama. Though it didn't change the fact that another was probably out there still grieving. Robin decided it was time to move on. Anyway, everyone, there is one more article you should all be aware of, said Robin. The rest of the crew got out of their moods knowing that they would have to pay attention. It was a lot to take in, finding out 3 emperors are dead, knowing that they could quite possibly run into the powerful killers, and now knowing that a nakama is out there all alone and suffering and they could do nothing about it. But they knew they had to listen to what Robin has to say. A large number of revolutionaries were killed in a short time. At around the same time of the death of the 3 emperors. You're kidding me, said Usopp. Revolutionaries were killed, shouted Brook. What the hell is going on? First 3 emperors are dead and now revolutionaries are being killed. Just what on earth is happening? Shouted Frankie, who too could not believe the news. Sanji took out his cigarette to blow out some smoke. In just a month so much happened, said Sanji, blowing out smoke. It doesn't matter, said Zoro with finality. Zoro, how could you say that? Those guys just got killed like that, said Nami, who is angry at Zoro's dismissal tone. That's right, Marimo. Don't you have a heart? Shouted Sanji, who probably only did it to side with Nami. It's just as I said. It doesn't matter. We're not revolutionaries and we don't know any of the people. So why should we care? Said Zoro as a matter of factly. Because, said Robin, who stopped her sentence. Sanji, hearing the tone of Robin's voice, couldn't help but turn to her. What's wrong, Robin-chan? Asked Sanji softly. It's because I was part of the Revolutionary Army, said Robin softly. What? Shouted the entire crew. Robin-chan, you're part of the Revolutionary Army? Asked the surprised Sanji. Robin, how could you have not told any of us? Asked an equally surprised Nami. Robin, don't just sit there, answer us, asked Usopp. Yeah, Robin, please, asked Chopper. Nico, Robin, asked Frankie. Robin-san, asked Brook. Only Zoro was silent, but his expression clearly said that he too wanted answers. Well, I was not part of the Revolutionary Army per se. I simply stayed with them during the 2 years to get stronger. And after the 2 years I would return to the crew. I never became an actual revolutionary, explained Robin. The crew all nodded and accepted that as an answer. That seemed to make sense. I simply stayed with them, and I did become close to them. Not anywhere as close to them as I am with you all, but still close. And since they were subordinates of Luffy's father, then I figured I could trust them. The crew nodded again, indicating they understood. They have to admit if the leader was Luffy's father, then they honestly believed he could be trusted with the life of one of their nakama. And it seemed he came through. I wasn't that close to them since my mind was set on becoming stronger and returning to the crew. Several of the names mentioned are commanders whom I met in the past, and they all seemed like good people dedicated to Dragon-san and their cause. I can't say that I mourn them a lot since I was never really close to them, but it still pains me that they are all dead," said Robin softly. "If I ever do run into them, I will not go easy, that's for sure," finished Robin with a determined voice. The crew all could understand. Robin was with them for 2 years, so some kind of bond had to have been formed. And while they could tell that Robin didn't grieve much over their deaths, it still affected and hurt her. And it was natural that she should want revenge if she ever runs into the murderers. Nonetheless, she was with the crew and they would do everything they could to help her and ease her pain. Sanji, upon hearing Robin mention the word commander, was reminded of something and had to ask. "Robin-chan, one question I wish to ask," asked Sanji. "Yes, what is it, Cook-san?" answered Robin. "That article you read about those revolutionaries that died, tell me," said Sanji, who now had his eyes shadowed. The crew all looked at Sanji, wondering what he wanted to know about the revolutionaries. Furthermore, why was he so serious? Was Ivankov one of those revolutionaries who died? Asked Sanji, his eyes still shadowed by his hair. "Of course, Sanji was on an Okama island with Ivankov," said Chopper, finally picking up why he asked that question. "Oh, I see, so that's why," said Brooke in response. Robin was silent for a moment. She knew she would be telling him bad news, but still it was hard. Especially telling it to a nakama who she cared about. "Yes, Revolutionary Commander Ivankov was one of those who were killed," said Robin in a solemn and regrettable voice. Sanji was silent for a few moments. "I see," Sanji finally said. "Anyway, thank you, Robin-chan. Anyway, I'll go prepare dinner," said Sanji, who finally left to go to the kitchen and prepare dinner. "Sanji-kun, wait," Nami called out. "Wait, hold on, Nami," said Zoro, who grabbed Nami's hand. "But Zoro," said Nami, who was angry that Zoro stopped her. "Leave the cook alone. He needs time to mourn. He's not the type to show his emotions in front of others. Let's leave him alone. He'll come out when he's ready. Besides, he's a fighter. Do you know how bad he'll feel if he's pitted as well? And worst of all by you or Robin, his beautiful ladies," said Zoro wisely. Nami looked down, knowing that Zoro was right. But still she wanted to comfort Sanji, who was her nakama. "Let it go for Nami. Wait until the right time," Zoro finished. Nami decided to do what Zoro said and wait for when he's ready. A little later at dinner the mood was quiet. Of course, meals were significantly more quieter than usual, which was something because ever since Luffy's departure, meals were fairly quiet and civilized, mainly due to Luffy's absence. But even by those standards, it was extremely quiet. And for good reason. A lot of big news was revealed today. First, the killings of 3 emperors, the deaths of the revolutionaries, and the consequences for all the deaths in the papers was weighing down heavily on each member of the Straw Hats. "I was never really that close to Ivankov," said Sanji, finally breaking the silence. "Ha," asked each of the Straw Hats, some verbally, others like Zoro and Robin more subtlety. "I was never really close to Ivankov, so I can't really say that I'm sad for his death. However, I did train for 2 years on his island, and it's thanks to him that I learned all those new recipes. Not to mention I'm a lot stronger because of my training with him, so that I can help the crew better. So I do owe him a lot," Sanji said, finally explaining his feelings. "I am sad for his death, but I can't let that get in the way of my cooking and the crew along with beating up that shitty Marimo," Sanji said with a smile. The crew all smiled, happy that at least Sanji was okay. Zoro, however, couldn't help the smile on his face. "It's always amazing how much a good fight can make someone feel. Anyway, I do now. If I find those bastards who murdered him, they are going to pay. That I swear. As much as I hate to admit it, I respected Ivankov and he was my friend, so if I find those responsible, they are going to get the ass beating of their lives," said Sanji with a determined look. "You're not the only on Cook-san. I too have grievances with those men. Be sure to kick them for me," said Robin softly with a charming smile. "Of course, Robin-chan," said Sanji in a mild flirt voice, since both of them were on the same page having issues with those people. "Baka Cook thinks he's going to get together with Robin over him using his crappy kicking. Like that'll ever happen," said Zoro, who once again has to pick a fight with the cook, though this one was more about friendship than their usual fights. "Care to repeat what you just said about my kicking?" said Sanji, who turned to Zoro. "I said you have crappy kicking," said Zoro with a smug look. And as usual, a fight broke out between the two and dinner seemed more lively than usual. A little bit after the fight was over between the two, Sanji finally had to say something else on his mind. But there is one other thing, said Sanji. Well, Cook, what is it? Don't keep us waiting, said Zoro, knowing Sanji was talking about the Ivankov issue. Well, when I was training, I spoke to Ivankov about the war. That guy fought alongside Luffy during that big war, and because of that I got to hear about what Luffy really went through during that great war, said Sanji. The crew all grew silent as they listened to Sanji continue. The fact that they did not know everything about the war beyond the papers and what their dear captain went through always got to them. They all wanted Luffy to talk but chose not to, knowing that it was a very sensitive topic since he lost his brother. Zoro likewise was interested because he too got in-depth knowledge on the war from Mihawk, who was a major participant. However, he was on the opposing side, so hear the Cook talk about Ivankov, who was on Luffy's side, was something he wanted to hear. Turns out that Ivankov was a major ally of Luffy during his break into Impel Down. He even saved his life. He was also helping him during the war itself. He and Luffy were really close because he was there for Luffy during Ace's death, protecting him. Luffy and him were definitely a lot closer than I was because of all they went through. So he's going to take Ivankov's death much harder. At this, the crew just realized the implications of what Sanji just said. Luffy lost Ace during the war. Now he lost his great friend and mentor Shanks, and now he's lost his comrade Ivankov. He's lost so much people in such a short space of time. It was just not fair. Luffy, oh my god, Luffy, said Nami, who was crying. Robin turned to hug Nami. There, Nami, it's alright, comforted Robin. Usopp and Chopper were both crying, knowing that Luffy was suffering even more. Zoro, Frankie and Brook both had similar feelings in their hearts over what Luffy was now going through. It was like ever since he left the crew, everything terrible has happened to him. At night in the girls' room, Nami was inside alone. However, she was not changing or anything like that. Instead, she was silently crying. Luffy, you have lost so much. First Ace, now Shanks, and then Ivankov. Why did you leave? If only you stayed, I could have been there to comfort you during your time of need. And it's my fault that you left. God, Luffy, I'm so sorry, thought Nami with tears in her eyes. Nami, Robin called out in a soft voice. Robin, you're here, said Nami, who quickly tried to wipe the tears out of her eyes. Nachan, what is? Talk to me. Robin resorted to using Nami's nickname. It's nothing, Robin Onisama. Nami likewise resorted to using Robin's nickname. You can tell me. Don't we always talk to each other, said Robin. Nami was silent for a moment. It's about Luffy, isn't it? Robin finally said with a tone of emotion to show how much she wanted her to talk. Luffy's been through so much. First his brother Ace, then Shanks, and now Ivankov. He just keeps on losing people so fast. It's just not fair, said Nami, finally stating what is on her mind. But life isn't fair, Nami. You and I of all people should know that. We can both say that from personal experience, said Robin, stating the truth. Nami looked down, knowing that Robin was right. Life wasn't fair. The fact that she lost Belmere and became a slave under her murderer for 8 years was proof of that. And Nami knew that Robin lost of her island and was on the run from the world government for 20 years. Life just wasn't fair. But there was light in the darkness, and that light was their Nakama. And Luffy was the brightest light out there. And now his light was cruelly being faded away. It's my fault. That day, if only I didn't explode, none of this would have happened. Nami confessed. No, Nami, that's not true, and you know it, said Robin. But it is. Luffy left because of me. After everything he did for me. After freeing me and my village from Arlong, I repay him by making him leave the crew. And now he's out there alone suffering, and it's because of me. Me, the one who betrayed him and yet still saved. Nami said with tears flowing freely. Nami, no one could have predicted that Luffy would have left, so don't blame yourself. You forget I too owe Luffy everything. When I wanted to die, he saved me and welcomed me with open arms. And he saved me from the world government, even going so far as declaring war on the world government solely for my sake. He freed me from my past. I owe him everything, and yet I couldn't do a thing to stop him from leaving, Robin stated as she too began crying. Robin, Nami couldn't help but say. This was the first time besides the Enies Lobby incident that she's seen her older sister with so much emotion. Nami, you aren't the only one suffering. I am too. I also want to be there for the boy who saved me in his time of need, but I can't. Nami, you aren't the only one, Robin said with tears coming from her eyes, which was an unusual sight. With that, the two women who both owed the rubber boy so much hugged each other. Their hearts were connected by the fact that it went out to the same boy or man and that he held it despite neither ever admitting it. Luffy's done so much for both of us. Not just us, but the others. Everyone we met on our journey was helped by Luffy somehow. He's always helping others. And now when he needs help I know we can help him, said Nami, who was still crying, but her tears were easing knowing Robin had similar feelings. It's just like 2 years ago. He lost his brother, and neither of us nor his crew were any here near him to support him. And now it's the same thing. Again he has to bear the burden of losing his friends alone. I just can't stand it, said Nami. It's alright, Nami, it's alright. We both want to help me. And the crew does as well. Even though he left on his own accord, he can still return. And when we find him, he wouldn't be alone anymore. Nachan will both be with him to help him just like he's done for us. So we'll have to be strong, not just for our sakes, but the crew's and especially for Luffy, said Robin. Thanks, Robin, said a grateful Nami. Anytime, Nami, replied Nami. With that the two women gave each other a warm sisterly hug after getting their feelings off there. Inside a vast fortress, Monkey D. Dragon was sitting on top his throne. In front were his greatest subordinate, the powerful and dreaded leader of the Knights of D, the Sagittarius Sigma D. Ren. The purging is complete, my lord, stated Ren. Excellent. Those fools who lack the drive to do what is necessary would only get in the way. They deserve to be eliminated, stated Dragon. Also the 3 emperors that would oppose us have all been dealt with. Luffy successful killed Big Mom. I took out Kaido and Blackbeard killed Shanks, stated Ren. I see. Everyone succeeded. Our greatest threats have been eliminated. Of course there are several others who need to be taken out. Rayleigh, my father Garp and a few others still pose a great threat to the army. But they can be taken out after the coming invasion. For now only those emperors were our main concern, stated Dragon. Anyway, speaking, how is Luffy? Asked Dragon. He is in a terrible mood, Lord Dragon, replied Ren. I see. Well, that is to be expected. After all, he was close to Shanks, Ivankov and Inzumu. So having lost all 3 of them would do that to him. Nonetheless, he is undoubtedly filled with rage. That rage would be harnessed during the invasion, said Dragon. Emotions can be a powerful weapon when used properly. And Luffy has more of it than any other member of the Knights. His emotions would be put to good use during the invasion, said Dragon. Also, revelry is taking place in a few days, my lord. Now that the emperors have fallen and the army purged of its weak, all preparations have been completed. All the Knights of D are ready and prepared to move out. We are ready for the invasion taking place in a few days. They are all awaiting your orders. Dragon then smiled and got off his throne. I see. Well then, shall we go? Asked Dragon, getting up from his throne. Everything that we have done has come to this point. The past 20 years were all devoted to this one moment. The moment when everything shall be set right. Everything shall be made the way it should be, said Dragon in a commanding tone. Ren, Dragon called out. My lord, answered Ren in a respectful tone. Notify the Knights of D, commanded Dragon. As you wish, my lord, replied Ren with a bow. The revolutionary army will now invade the holy land of Mariehua, said Dragon with his green cloak flowing. So everyone, what do you think? The revolutionary army is now on the move and Dragon has ordered the Knights of D to invade Mariehua. Also some notes. This FIC is a harem FIC, so I naturally added some name suffix Robin. Of course either of the girls blatantly admitted to loving him, or are blushing or anything, but you could see the signs that they love Luffy present. I know a lot of you expected the crew to have a reaction to Big Mom's death since Luffy declared war on her, but that was overshadowed by the fact that 3 emperors died at the same time. And one of them is Luffy's friend Shanks. Unfortunately, this chapter turned out very similar to its counterpart in my other FIC One Piece Shippuden. My bad, but considering both are very similar, it was bound to happen. Robin was with the Revolutionary Army for 2 years, so I would assume that she would have been close to some of them, so it's only natural that she would mourn them. However, she wasn't really tight with them as she was with the Straw Hats, so she would not grieve too much. Also, she wouldn't go all Avenger and kill everyone she meets. She'll only bear a grudge on whoever killed the revolutionaries. Robin joined because they called her the light of the revolution. Also because since the leader was Luffy's father, she figured he could be trusted. She doesn't know about his true nature. And she never met any of the knights. They were kept secret even in the army itself. Sanji likewise would mourn Ivankov, but not much. He didn't seem that close or tight with Ivankov, but he would naturally be sad, though not too sad. He would not go hunting down the killer, but he would not go easy on the murderers. I decided not to have Usopp's father Yasopp. I don't want him to start acting hateful or such because of his father's death. The only Avenger-like member of the Straw Hats would be Luffy himself. Having Robin, Sanji and Usopp have grudges would complicate the plot too much. The main point of the Straw Hats are bonds and wanting to save their Nakama Luffy, not on revenge of things like that. That is Luffy's task. Sanji felt better after a good fight with Zoro. He secretly approached him privately and a fight was all it took to make him feel better. That's why Sanji was able to talk during dinner. I'm pretty sure Ivankov told Sanji about the events of the war. He and Zoro know more about the war than anyone else. While most of the crew read about the war in the papers, Zoro and Sanji were training with people who actually fought in the war, mainly Ivankov and Mihawk. However, Zoro was told about the war from Mihawk's perspective, in other words, any enemy's perspective since he was on the world government's side. Sanji got it from Ivankov's perspective, a comrade's perspective since he was on Luffy's side. I know Zoro isn't one to suggest running. But even he knows the dangers that an emperor poses. Furthermore, the enemy are three beings who are strong enough to kill an emperor, so Zoro would realize that even that would be too much even with the crew's training. Furthermore, even he realizes that the crew has weakened in power thanks to the fact that its strongest member Luffy is gone. Also, Luffy was the pillar of strength, so his leaving further weakens the crew. One part of the Holy Land we see none other than the representatives of Alabasta Kingdom. Cobra Nefertari, the king of Alabasta, and Princess Vivi Nefertari. Along with them were the captain of Alabasta Kingdom's royal army Igaram. Escorting the group were 3 bodyguards, Shaka, Pell, and finally former leader of the rebel army Koza. The entire group was here to represent Alabasta Kingdom. Of course, the group knew that this would be by far the most important reverie meeting ever due to the events of the past 2 years, especially the past month. We're here, Vivi-sama, said Igaram. Indeed, it's felt like ages ever since I've been here, replied Vivi. I guess that is to be expected. The country was in a civil war thanks to crocodile and baroque works that we didn't exactly have time for reverie, said Cobra. Well, that's certainly true, my king, said Koza. Anyway, Cobra-sama, Vivi-sama, both of you would have to stay sharp during the meeting. So much has happened recently that if either of you miss anything, it could spell disaster for us. Cautioned Shaka. He's right, Vivi-sama. Despite Alabasta Kingdom recovering well after Crocodile's defeat during these past 2 years, Alabasta Kingdom is still in turmoil. It would take a while before we reach back to our former glory. We can't afford to make ourselves look bad at this event. Pell also cautioned Vivi. Right, I'll do my best, replied Vivi in a determined voice. Besides, Luffy-kun and his friends would definitely want this, said Cobra with a smile. Upon hearing Luffy's name, Vivi couldn't help but smile fondly. The memory of her nakama, especially the straw hat-wearing captain, always brought a smile to her face. She just couldn't help it. They were her nakama and saved her kingdom. Yes, that is what they would surely want, replied Vivi with a smile adorning her face. By the way, you heard that they are back, and by the looks of it better than ever, said Igaram, who like Vivi enjoyed talking about the straw hats. They all seem to be doing very well, so naturally you should do the same if you still want to call yourself their nakama, said Koza, who despite never really officially meeting the straw hats heard great stories about them from Shaka, Pell, Igaram, Cobra, and especially Vivi, though at times she seemed to rant on about Straw Hat Luffy more than the others. Well, you're right. They're doing their best to achieve their dreams, so I should do my best for Alabasta, said Vivi. In other part of Mariehawa were the representatives of Ryuga Kingdom. They were the king of Ryuga Kingdom, King Neptune, along with his 3 sons. They were the Neptune brothers and the 3 strongest warriors of Ryuga Kingdom, Fukaboshi, Riboshi, and Manboshi. Also with them was the youngest of the Neptune family, the adorable and beautiful Princess Shirahoshi. Along with them were the Minister of the Left, and the Minister of the Right were also along to help the royal family. Reverie, it's been a while since I've been here. Especially with all that has happened with Fishman Island, Jamon, said Neptune, who ended his sentence with his trademark Jamon. We're here, father, at Reverie. Now we can come one step closer to making mother's dream a reality, said Fukaboshi, remembering his beloved mother Otoheim. Yeah, finally mother's dream is within our grasp. We already managed to collect a lot of signatures for the past 10 years, Lati Aidu, said Riboshi. Moonfish shake, and thanks to the actions of the Straw Hat Pirates, fishmen and merfolk trust humans now more than ever before, said Manboshi. With all the large amount of signatures we've gathered, combined with the great level of trust between humans and fishmen thanks to the actions of the Straw Hat Pirates, humans and fishmen are closer than even before. We can really bond with humans this time, said the old catfish merman minister of the left. Yeah, Otoheim-sama would definitely be happy if she saw this. I'd probably say the same for Fisher Tiger as well. Both of their dreams are coming to bear fruit, and ironically it is because of humans, pirates nonetheless, said the minister of the right, a seahorse merman. And it a good thing that we found those pills, said the minister of the left. True. Those pills have been in Fishman Island for a long time. They're meant to turn extremely large or small fishmen into the size of regular humans to allow better interaction. They're only temporary size changers and have no side effects. They're perfect. Neptune-sama and Shirahoshi-sama, both of you had to take one. Your large sizes might understandably intimidate the humans, replied Minister of the Right. Fishman Island has a very large amount of them for a long time. Because of bad relationship with humans, merfolk and fishmen never wanted to interact with humans, so they never wanted to take them. That has changed recently thanks to Luffy-kun and his crew, said Fukaboshi. While the royal family and ambassadors were talking about the bonds between humans and fishmen growing, Shirahoshi was strangely quiet. By the way, Shirahoshi, you've been strangely quiet. I thought that being above ground, you would be more enthusiastic, said Fukaboshi. Yes, sis, what's wrong, Lati? I do? Asked Raboshi. Yes, Shirahoshi. What's the matter? You should do moonfish mambo to make you feel better, said Maboshi, who was dancing moonfish mambo. When they all inspected Shirahoshi close, they noticed that she was twiddling her fingers and sprouted a cute blush on her face. It was then that they knew what was going on, and realized there was no need for alarm. It became obvious to everyone Shirahoshi spoke to that the mermaid princess had a crush on the straw hat wearing hero. Because they were the kingdom's saviors, naturally they were the talk of the entire kingdom. As a result, anywhere you go, at some point the straw hats would be brought up. Unfortunately, Shirahoshi's time in the tower made things hard. Because she was so sheltered all her life, she was never able to control her emotions properly. So she cried whenever she was happy or sad. And as for the straw hats, well, because she was unable to control her emotions properly, she was never able to suppress her feelings for the boy captain. As a result, whenever they mentioned the straw hats or Luffy, she would start blushing and occasionally twiddling her fingers together. Most girls would have ways of hiding their crushes on cute boys, but inexperienced Shirahoshi had no idea how to do such things. And worse was that the entire kingdom was aware that Shirahoshi and Luffy had an adventure together, which meant she was questioned a lot about Luffy, especially by the mermaid population. Well, I'm happy to be here at Reverie. Now I can finally do something to help Mother's dream, said Shirahoshi, who just got over her thoughts of Luffy. She always wanted to help her mother, but unfortunately because of Vanderdecken she couldn't. But that has changed thanks to Luffy. Now she can live her dream of seeing the outside world and helping her mother's dream of a world where humans and merfolk coexist come true. She owes Luffy-sama so much. Ho ho ho, well now we all can do that together, Jamon, said Neptune. Well said, Shirahoshi, said Fukaboshi with a smile. Yes, shouted Raboshi and Mamboshi. The meeting was far more heated than usual. The events of the past 2 years all came crashing down at the table all at once. First was the death of Whitebeard. Now the deaths of 3 emperors. Also there was the massacre of the revolutionaries, as well as the rise and return of the Straw Hat Pirates. In fact, the meeting seemed to be mostly focused solely on those 3 things. But it became apparent that the deaths of the emperors overshadowed all the previous issues. The fact that there was a force out there strong enough to defeat 3 emperors frightened everyone present. And for good reason. It took the full force of the world government plus the power of the Shichibukai to combat the power of just one of the emperors. Yet 3 of them were defeated at the same time. It was clear that whoever was responsible for this clearly has enough military might to trample the world government, and clearly that has everyone paranoid. As a result, the meeting was far less productive and more chaotic than it should be. However, given the extreme gravity of what happened in the past 2 years, especially the past month, it was understandable. After the meeting, the rest of the participants decided to take a break and just enjoy the calming scenery of the Holy Land. Everyone presented really enjoyed this break from the meeting, for the meeting itself was so heated and intense due to recent events that a break like this was really appreciated. Of course, that did not mean that they could drop their guard. This event Reverie had important people from many different nations attending. Even those not directly allied with the world government were present. As a result, even the slightest actions could trigger a full-scale war. Of course, no one ever wanted war under any circumstances. Especially in this situation when the mysterious threat was out there. The Emperor's strength was on par with the admirals who were crowned as the world government's most powerful fighters. If there are foes out there who could take out the emperors, then chances are they could just as easily take out the admirals. And if the admirals could not protect them, then no one could. This realization meant that no one wanted to start a war when these dangerous figures were out there and are bold enough to attack even the world's most powerful fighters. But nonetheless, there are always selfish people out there who would start wars on a whim. So naturally, people had to tread with caution. And furthermore, the presence of the world nobles complicated things even further, so they were avoided as much as possible. Somewhere on the Holy Land we could see 2 parties were near each other. They were the representatives of Alabasta and the representatives of Fishman Island. Both were currently walking in the same direction when they spotted each other. Out of politeness, they decided to greet each other. "Hello there," greeted Cobra. "Hello there everyone," Vivi followed suit. Igaram, Shaka, Pell and Koza greeted the group politely. Also their guards were lower than usual since everyone could tell then the fish men and merfolk from Ryuga Kingdom were kind and benevolent people, so there was no need to be too uptight. Of course, as bodyguards some level of awareness and focus was needed. Hello there to you too, Jaman, Neptune greeted, even bowing politely. Hi there everyone, Shirahoshi greeted shyly. Greetings there, greeted Fukaboshi, the eldest and most mature of the Neptune siblings. Hello there Latiaidu, sang Raboshi, whose greeting sounded more like a choir than a proper greeting. Hiya there, greeted Manaboshi, who was doing his trademark moonfish mambo. The ministers of the left and right both greeted the Alabaster royal family and their bodyguards with polite bows of their own. You two need to stop acting so immaturely. You're both princes of the royal family and are acting as such in front of a royal family. Act your age, boys, scolded the minister of the right, who knew the implications of acting so inappropriately. Instantly the two younger brothers of the Neptune families go out of their immature attitudes and were looking at the ground like two children who got caught doing something they shouldn't be doing. I'm really sorry Latiaidu, said Raboshi with his eyes still downcast and a cloud over his head. Me too. I don't want to do any more moonfish mambo, said Manaboshi, equally depressed, also with a cloud over his head. And what's with that Latiaidu and moonfish mambo? Both of you need to stop acting like this in front of such important delegates, scolded the minister of the right. We're both are really sorry and wouldn't do it again, said both Raboshi and Manaboshi together, both with black clouds over their heads. While this was going on, the delegates of Alabasta looked at the display with confused looks. This was a bit of an unusual act for members of the royal family, but they were not in any way, shape, or form offending anyway, so they didn't mind. Also, it's not like they haven't seen anything even more bizarre. All of them, with the exception of Koza, remembered even more bizarre behavior from not a royal family but from pirates. In fact, what they were witnessing was completely normal compared to some of the things they've seen with the Straw Hats. In fact, their behavior actually reminded them of the Straw Hats. Specifically how Nami would shout at the crew. Because of this, every one of them found their behavior amusing and even nostalgic. Meanwhile, Neptune realized what they were doing in front of the representatives of Alabasta and called for a stop in the behavior. Clearing his throat, he said, "Sorry about that. My sons and my staff could be a bit eccentric, so please forgive them," said Neptune. "No, not at all. It's all right, believe me, I've seen even stranger and weirder behavior before," replied Cobra with a smile. With this, Vivi couldn't help but smile and laugh when she remembered who her father was referring to. And when she thought about one in particular, a certain rubber, she blushed slightly. "Yep, my father's right, believe me, we've seen a lot worse." "Trust me, you're normal compared to what we've seen," said Vivi while laughing as her blush died down to almost barely noticeable. "Well then, I believe you're the royal family of, Alabasta, if I'm correct, Jaman," said Neptune. "That is correct. I'm Cobra Nefertari, and this is my daughter Vivi Nefertari," said Cobra, introducing himself and his daughter. "Hello there," said Vivi. "And these four are our bodyguards. First, this is Igaram, captain of the royal army," said Cobra, introducing Igaram. "This is Shaka and the other is Pell. They are two of Alabasta Kingdom's greatest warriors," said Cobra, introducing his two bodyguards. "Hello there," said Shaka with a smile. "Greetings," greeted Pell politely. "Finally, this is Koza," introduced Vivi. "Hello there," said Koza. "And if I recall, you're King Neptune, king of Ryuga Kingdom of the Fishman Island, I believe," said Cobra. "That is correct, Jaman." "I am Neptune," said Neptune, singing his name. "Greetings, I'm Fukaboshi, eldest son of the royal family," greeted Fukaboshi. "And I'm Raboshi, second son of the royal family," greeted Raboshi. "And as for me, I am Manaboshi, the third son," greeted Manaboshi. "And I'm Shirahoshi, the youngest and only daughter of Father Neptune," said Shirahoshi. "And these two are my ministers. The first is the minister of the left while the other is the minister of the right." Neptune introduced his two ministers. The two ministers likewise bowed respectfully. "Anyway, it's really nice to have a fishman at this year's reverie. We usually don't see your kind here too often, so welcome and good to have you," said a smiling Cobra. "Ho ho ho ho, thank you, King Cobra, and I'm delighted to be here." "And I'm sure that the others are happy to be here as well," said Neptune, pointing to his children and ministers. "Really, thank you very much. That's really nice of you. There are some really nice humans in this world," said Shirahoshi with a smile. Cobra, Vivi, Shaka, Igaram, Pell and Koza looked at her questionably. Fukaboshi picked up on their confusion and decided to continue where his father left off. "Well, you see, humans and fish men don't exactly get along. So we are here to try and extend our bonds with humans. The people of our race are willing to do this, so naturally we have to help," said Fukaboshi, giving a slight overview of the situation but made sure not to mention anything regarding the discrimination. "Oh, I see. I'm sorry to hear that. Well, just so you know, Alabasta Kingdom supports your mission to its fullest, said Vivi with a smile. Thank you, that means so much to us. It's great that we have another kingdom supporting us, said the minister of the left. Thank you very much, Juman, said Neptune gratefully. Shirahoshi couldn't help but lower her head, bowing down out of gratitude. Thank you so much. This really means a lot to me. I can't believe that there are so many nice humans out there, said Shirahoshi, who as usual cries whenever she is happy. Everyone looks at her and smile. Unfortunately, Koza was never the diplomatic kind of person, and unfortunately had to break up the touching moment with an accidental comment. Hey, does she always cry this much? Asked Koza, generally curious and a little annoyed. Koza, you're heartless. Leave the poor girl alone, said an irritated Vivi, who knocked Koza's shoulder. But still, you have to admit, it's annoying. I mean, nothing even really happened so far, and she's crying, said Koza, who was still annoyed. Cobra and the other Alabasta delegates knew Koza was a tough guy even as a child, so his saying snarky comment like this was expected, even during a big event like this, and in such a touching moment as well. The Neptune family and the ministers didn't mind, for the new Koza meant no harm, and has not discriminated them in any way, and they expected some humans to be annoyed by the crying, so they didn't mind. Koza, apologize right now, said Vivi in a commanding voice. What, why? I didn't do anything to make her cry, replied Koza. Apologize for being a jerk to the mermaid, said Vivi with a tick mark on her head. Okay, fine. I'm sorry, Shirahoshi, I believe it was, said Koza in a dismissal tone, indicating he didn't mean it one bit. It's alright, really. I don't mind. I know another human who I admire deeply and calls me crybaby a lot. So I don't mind. Though I do wish to stop being a crybaby, said Shirahoshi, who was wiping away her tears. Ha, that's true. Luffy always calls Shirahoshi a crybaby, said Manaboshi. Instantly the conversation grew silent. Everyone stopped the conversation to look at Manaboshi. Manaboshi then finally realized his slip-up of letting the secret out that they knew Straw Hat Luffy, the world-famous pirate, personally. Manaboshi, what the hell are you thinking? You can't just go telling everyone that. They'll know we're friends with the pirate, said Raboshi, who clearly wasn't happy at this development. Indeed, Manaboshi, you need to think before you speak, said Fukaboshi in his usual mature voice. The entire Neptune family and the ministers knew that this meeting would no longer go well. Straw Hat Luffy was a world-famous pirate who has broken into Eni's lobby, and pelled down a major participant during the war. That, along with being the son of the revolutionary dragon, made him an immensely dangerous figure. And they knew that now that Alabasta Kingdom knew of their involvement with the Straw Hats, any sort of diplomatic relations with them would be impossible. Worse, if they told any of the other kings, queens, or high-ranking officials here, this year's revelry would go badly, and fishmen and merfolk would be looked down upon even more. They would be looked at as creatures who would aid dangerous pirates. This was clearly not looking good. So what, said Shirahoshi in a brave voice. Everyone turned to her. So what if they know we are friends with Luffy-sama? I don't care. Luffy-sama is a strong, kind, caring, and courageous human. He freed me from my past and saved my kingdom, said Shirahoshi in a brave voice. Meanwhile, the Neptune family looked on, shocked at Shirahoshi's sudden outburst and bravery. This was unlike her, and right now she didn't seem like the usual shy mermaid she usually was. She seemed a lot more assertive, as if speaking about something she truly believed in. In fact, she appeared more like her mother Otoheim now than ever before. It was amazing how much Luffy changed her. Shirahoshi, was all Neptune could say. Even if we don't become friends with you. Even if we don't ever become friends with humans. I would always be Luffy-sama's friend. He's been there for me when I needed him, and he's my friend, and I don't care what anyone else has to say, said Shirahoshi in a determined voice, not holding any of her usual shyness. The Alabasta Kingdom went from shocked to amused. So amused that all of them started chuckling, even laughing. Unfortunately, none of the Ryuga Kingdom's members could understand why they were laughing. However, to them it's as if they were making fun of their little sister's commitment to Fishman Island's savior. Is there something you all find funny? Said Fukaboshi in a hostile voice. Likewise, Neptune, Raboshi and Manaboshi, along with the ministers of both left and right, had hostile looks on their faces. I'm sorry. It's just that the way she defended him. It's not like she's the only one around here who is a friend with Luffy-kun, said Cobra with a smile. Wait, Luffy-kun. Are you saying you know Straw Hat Luffy personally? Lati, I do, asked the shocked Raboshi. Of course I do. Just like yours, my kingdom was also saved by Luffy-san and his crew. He and the others are my nakama, said Vivi. Hearing this, whatever tense atmosphere was present was gone instantly, and a more light-hearted one was present. Members of both kingdoms got along well with each other more than before, knowing they both shared a bond with the Straw Hat Pirates. In fact, they spent the entire day together just talking and having fun. Most of the conversations were inevitably about the Straw Hat Pirates. Don't worry, compared to the Straw Hats, your two younger sons are practically normal, said Vivi laughing. I would have to admit that you're certainly right about that. You should have seen them during the banquet celebrating Fishman Island's saving, said the minister of the left. You should have seen ours. I swear there was never such a lively banquet ever in the royal palace, said Shaka. But I still can't believe that your kingdom was also saved by Luffy-kun and his crew. This was really a coincidence, said Fukaboshi. But does it surprise? Said Vivi. Excuse me? Asked Fukaboshi. That's just the kind of person Luffy-san is. He just likes to help people, especially those he calls his friends. And if you are his friends, then it is definitely expected that he would save your kingdom without a second thought. Luffy-kun is the greatest man I've ever met, said Vivi with a smile on her face, compliment with a slight blush. You're right. That is exactly what Luffy-sama would do, said Shirahoshi in a shy voice, with her blush being more visible than Vivi's. Anyway, Shirahoshi, how about we go talk somewhere else, said Vivi with a smile. Sure, I don't mind, said Shirahoshi, who also had a smile present. With that, the two girls left the males to go and talk in private while giggling at the same time. They looked like two teenage girls who were about to go and gossip about hot guys, which is ironic since they were about to do something similar. Vivi-sama, Shirahoshi-sama, where are you both going? Called out Igaram. Just let them be, said Koza in a bored voice. They probably going to talk about girl stuff. And probably Straw Hat as well, said Koza in a bored voice. Both kingdoms' members stopped what they were doing to look at Koza. What? Their kingdoms were both saved by the same guy. So isn't it natural that they want to have alone time to talk about their knight in shining armor, said Koza, who right now was getting creeped out. With that pandemonium set, and mostly due to the fathers who were upset that their little princess was now going for a guy. That, along with trying to calm down the overprotective fathers. Meanwhile, Vivi and Shirahoshi were right now alone together. The two girls, the two princesses who both were saved by the charismatic young man, were now alone where they could freely express their thoughts to each other. Only they could truly understand what the other was thinking, because they both experienced the same thing. Luffy-san is a really amazing person, isn't he? Said Vivi in a soft voice. Yes, he is. He is the greatest human I've ever met, replied Shirahoshi. He freed me from Vanderdecken-sama and saved my kingdom from Hody-sama. Also thanks to him, Mother's dream can finally happen, said Shirahoshi with a smile. I'm pretty much the same. He saved my kingdom from Crocodile, and now my kingdom is prospering. He's really done a lot for me. For both of us, said Vivi, who had a fond smile. I'm also a much stronger and braver person because of him. I can face my fears better, and I want to be a stronger person when I see Luffy-sama again. I promised him I wouldn't be a crybaby when I see him again, said Shirahoshi. I also want to see him again. And I want to have a big feast waiting for him. Luffy-san does eat a lot, said Vivi. You know it's thanks to Luffy-san that we really became such close friends. I mean, both of us are princesses and had our kingdom saved by him. And we both hold him in high regards, said Vivi. You're right. And that's probably why I feel so delighted being near you. Because we're so similar, said Shirahoshi. Well, that's certainly true. We're both connected because of him, said Vivi. Shirahoshi couldn't help the smile on her face. Though I'll admit you do turn red a lot whenever we talk about Luffy-san, said Vivi in a teasing voice. And with that, Shirahoshi's face lit up like a Christmas tree. I also noticed that you do that as well, said Shirahoshi timidly. What, me? Oh, no way, replied Vivi, whose face ironically turned red as well. With that, the girls continued giggling and talking about Luffy for the rest of the day. The next day another meeting was held which had pretty much the same results as the first. Also during breaks, the Alabasta royal family and the Neptune royal family would spend time with each other. More noticeable, Vivi and Shirahoshi seemed to have bonded together to the point that they appeared like sisters. Meanwhile, high in the sky above the holy city of Mariewa, 13 figures were standing in the air. Look at them all. They don't know what's about to take place, commented Dragon ominously. The Knights of D are ready to attack on your order, my lord, said Sabo. Father, I am ready to do this, said Luffy in a determined voice. Well then, shall we begin, said Dragon. Immediately 12 huge tornadoes appeared out of nowhere, directly striking different points of Mariewa. With that, each of the 11 present members of the Knights of D jumped into the center of one of the 11 tornadoes, fully prepared to destroy everything. Each of them landed on the Holy Land at the same time. Fenrir D. Hannibal has landed, said Hannibal. Isanade D. Sand has landed, said Sambai. Ottoman D. Yuri has landed, said Yuri. Kizara D. Electra has landed, said Electra. Alkane D. Jupiter has landed, said Jupiter. Melkon D. Kanka has landed, said Kanka. Aaron D. Monroe has landed, said Monroe. Zero D. Scorpius has landed, said Scorpius. Nexus D. Zerif has landed, said Zerif. Bell D. Kirov has landed, said Kirov. Monkey D. Luffy has landed, said Luffy. Outlook D. Sabo has landed, said Sabo. Lord Dragon, all Knights of D have successfully entered the Holy City, said Sabo, informing Dragon. Standing high above Mariehua overseeing the eve of this deadly crusade, this one-sided massacre, Dragon was observing the march of the Knights of D. Let the invasion of Mariehua begin, said Dragon. The invasion of Mariehua has begun. A major turning point of this story is at hand. As usual, some notes. This FIC does have Vivek Luffix Shirahoshi present. However, because Shirahoshi was locked up and sheltered, she can't control her blushing or feelings for Luffy as well as Vivi could. Vivi has feelings, but she is better at keeping them under wraps. Not much happened here. I just wanted to have Vivi and Shirahoshi meet up. I think the relationship between those two parallels that of Nami and Robin. Both Nami and Robin had their mother killed at a young age and both suffered terribly during their lives. Both were saved from their respective hell by Luffy, which resulted in both of them loving him. Robin is the more mature of the two and acts like a big sister for Nami. Likewise, Vivi and Shirahoshi are both princesses and both had their kingdoms threatened to be destroyed. Both had their respective kingdoms saved by Luffy and as a result both love him. Vivi is clearly the more mature of the two and as such is almost like a big sister for Shirahoshi. Shirahoshi and Neptune are much smaller than their regular size. Shirahoshi is the size of a normal mermaid while Neptune is the size of a large person, not a giant. This is because of a pill that allows a fishman or merman to change their size to that of a normal person. It is so that they don't appear intimidating to the humans. The pills are temporary and harmless. This was done because I don't see how I could have Shirahoshi in the harem if she is a giant mermaid. I believe that if the royal family from Alabasta and the royal family from Ryuga Kingdom met, they would get along. Both have benevolent kings and neither Cobra nor Vivi are the discriminating type. Especially since both were saved by Luffy. I believe if Fishman Island ever wants support for human-fishman relations, Alabasta will agree completely. Having Vivi and Shirahoshi present sets up the inevitable confrontation they would have with the Dark Luffy. Dragon's power. He has the weather fruit. This allows him to control and manipulate weather and weather phenomena, even create powerful storms. In other words, the atmosphere. Using his devil fruit powers, he solidified the air underneath him so that he and the other knights can stand on it. He then created 12 tornadoes to strike the holy city, and each of the knights jumped into each one. He made the tornadoes such that the knights inside wouldn't not be harmed. Mariehua is on top the red line. That means that it is very high up. Furthermore, it is surrounded by 2 marine bases, Marine Headquarters and G1. As such, they are heavily fortified. Because of this, and its height, it is virtually impossible to attack by a fleet of S. However, they never expected to be attacked from the air. There are 12 knights, but clearly the final knight Blackbeard is missing. He is missing because he is an emperor, as such has to manage his territory. More importantly, it's because they don't want Luffy finding OU. All Knights of D, scatter, order Sabo with a cold tone and fearsome look in his eyes. Without hesitation, all the Knights of D immediately dispersed from their respective landing positions. Some were quickly running through the city, others were hopping from building to building. They were moving to allow sufficient distance from each other so that they would inflict the maximum damage to the city while not getting in each other's way. Begin, commanded Sabo. With those words, all the knights immediately went on the offensive. Each of them activated their devil fruit powers along and launched a barrage of vicious attacks to everyone and everything nearby. To them, whether it be the buildings or the people, they were all allied to the world government, the tyrannical organization that did them and many others so much wrong in the past. With the exception of the ones Dragon specifically ordered not to harm, all of them would be destroyed without a shred of mercy. The world government showed them no mercy, so they will show them none. Marine Headquarters next to Mariehua. Fleet Admiral Akainu, sir! Shouted a Marine barging into his office. The head of the Marines and arguably its most ruthless member looked up from behind his desk, his eyes as cold and as ruthless as ever. What is it? Replied Akainu. The Marine who barged into his office gulped for a second. Akainu's reputation as a ruthless absolute justice member and a destructive fighter was well known throughout the world, and everyone, even the Marines, feared him. Sir, it's an emergency. Mariehua is under attack, finally said the Marine, jumping out of his desk as if it was on fire. Akaino's face was struck in panic, very unusual for someone like him. What? Said Akainu, sweat dripping down his face. It was reported that 11 large tornadoes struck Mariehua simultaneously. Immediately afterwards, reports indicate that several intruders have infiltrated the holy city, possibly using the tornadoes as a distraction, and have begun attacking the holy city, said the Marine. Akainu gritted his teeth. After Fisher Tiger's raid, extra measures were taken to ensure that a repeat never happened. Until now, Mariehua was impenetrable. The fact that not one but several people have attacked the city was unprecedented. But then he remembered something: the tornadoes. Tornadoes were frequent in the Grand Line, especially the New World, but not on the Red Line itself. So for not one but 11 tornadoes to strike the Holy City was no coincidence. Someone had to be responsible. Further supporting this theory was the fact that intruders infiltrated the World Government Center at the exact same time. He knew one person that is capable of such a thing. "Describe the intruders," asked the Fleet Admiral. Well, sir. Well, no one has been able to get a good look at them, but they all seem to be wearing a green cloak. Also, all of them are extremely powerful," replied the Marine to the Fleet Admiral's question. "I see. So it's them. They have finally made their move," said Akainu mostly to himself. Sir, what are your orders?" asked the Marine. "Contact Admiral Kizaru and all Marines at Navy HQ and at G1. Tell them we are under attack and they are all ordered to head to Mariehawa to battle the intruders." "I'm heading there myself," said Akainu. As he walked out of his office, he took one last look at the reporting Marine. "The enemies are revolutionaries," said Akainu. The Marine in question gulped both at Akainu's intimidating stare and the fact that they were under attack by revolutionaries. Back at the Holy City, things were looking grim for the world government. They were caught completely off guard by the sudden attack and the casualties were mounting at a high rate. Meanwhile, the Knights of D were continuing on unhindered and undeterred. Fenrir D. Hannibal, of the Knights of D, was in his human panther hybrid mode, currently using claws, jaws and brute force to shred all the enemies he came across. All member of the world government, be it Marines, government officials, even nobles who dared come into his path, were torn to pieces by Hannibal. Hannibal was in a berserker-like mode. "Come on, bastards, give me more. Attack me with all you got," shouted Hannibal, who was in killing frenzy. On another part of the city, Kizara D. Electra, of the Knights of D, unleashed her assault. She placed her hands on the ground and immediately, several humongous plants shot out of the ground and began engulfing the buildings. Several more plants sprung up, but these uprooted themselves and began using their powerful vines to lash, strangle, and kill anyone who came in their paths. Some even had large Venus fly-trap mouths and began shredding up buildings and people. "Death to the world government," said Electra in a deadly tone. Zero D. Scorpius, of the Knights of D, used his powers to quickly create a large army of puppets, each of which had swords with them, that began slaughtering Marines and world government officials left and right. The Marines and government officials were disorganized and scared, while the puppet army was emotionless and worked in synchrony due to being controlled by just one man. None of them had a chance. "How do you like it, world government?" "This is my art," said Scorpius in a psychopathic tone. Another part of the Holy City was under assault by Ottoman D. Yuri, of the Knights of D, who shot out from his hands a large amount of sharp crystals, each of which plowed through several people and even buildings. Upon further inspection, one could also see that several people were encased in crystals and even entire buildings were crystallized by Yuri. Several unfortunate people were shattered when Yuri knocked them all down. "For the sake of all those you destroyed, you shall perish," said Yuri with cold conviction in his voice. The section of the city under assault by the great swordsman of the Knights of D, Melkon D. Kenka, was faring no better than any other section. Kenka, unlike most of the other knights, was not using his devil fruit powers. He did not need to. He was trained by the world's strongest swordsman, Hawkeye Mihawk of the Shichibukai. Despite not using his powers, his sword skills were more than enough. He was using his great skills hacking, cutting and dissecting any fool who dared approach him. "Captain Mihawk, I really wish you could see this," said Kenka with a dark smile. Another section of the Holy City was also under heavy assault, this time by a former member of their own. Aaron D. Monroe was hailed as powerful human weapon whose power was on par with the legendary Rob Lucci. Now the Rokushiki was being used against the very ones who taught it to him. Using a combination of Gebu, Shurgon and Rakukuya, all members of the world government who stood before him were instantly slaughtered by the very style they helped create. He was in his human form, for he felt that right now, he didn't need his devil fruit powers. "How does it feel to be on the receiving end of the Rokushiki?" said Monroe with an evil smirk. A certain section of the Holy City was covered in red. It was not only the red of the massacred members of the world government, it was also from another source, Bel D. Kirov. Using his devil fruit powers, Kirov had entire structures and even people covered in hardened blood. Kirov himself was massacring all enemies he saw. "You took everything away from me. Now I shall take everything away from you," said Kirov with a cold, fearsome tone. In another part of Mariehawa, a large group of Marines and world government officials charged towards another member of the powerful Knights of D. This member was Nexus D. Zirif. As soon they all surrounded him and attacked, they were all thrust back by an invisible force. Many of them were thrown into each other, having their bones broken in the process. Others were even sent flying into buildings. "Feel my power, world government," said Zeref with cold conviction in his voice. Another section of the holy city was under attack, this time not by blood but by several humongous corrosive acid hydras. The hydras used their long acidic necks to stretch out, and anything or anyone touched was quickly burned by the extremely corrosive acid of Alkane D. Jupiter. Jupiter had his arms up and directing the hydras. At the same time, acid was literally flooding around Jupiter, which was burning away the buildings and people. Jupiter himself was wearing a mask to cover his hideous features. "You created me so that I could suffer. I will now make you all suffer," said Jupiter in a slurred voice due to his deformations. Isanade D. Sanbai, the only fishman of the Knights of D, was currently using his incredible physical strength and unmatched skill in fishman karate to kill all those he saw. He knew that everyone with the exception of the ones mentioned by Lord Dragon were responsible for the persecution of his people. He, like Monroe and Kanka, wasn't using his devil fruit powers. However, unlike Monroe and Kanka, who were not using it because they felt they didn't need to, Sanbai wasn't using his powers due to his pride as a fishman. By using the skills he has due to being a fishman, he feels he is avenging his people's discrimination. "Come on, humans. You like to hurt and persecute fishmen? Well, here's one right now. Attack him with all your might," shouted Sanbai, who was in a berserker-like mode. The main star of the army, none of the Dragon's son Monkey D. Luffy, was currently using his rubber powers and reflexes to overwhelm and kill his enemies. He was recently corrupted by his father, and now killed without hesitation. His powers, enhanced by the power of D, allowed him to viciously kill his enemies with single attacks that left carnage in his path. His punches shattered skulls, and he even ripped his enemies apart. It was unusual for Luffy to ever be this vicious, but he was no longer Monkey D. Luffy, captain of the Straw Hats. He was Monkey D. Luffy, Knight of D. "You bastards, this is for all the terrible things you all ever did," said Luffy, continuing his slaughter. Finally, the last member of the Knights of D, Outlook D. Sabo, who was the leader of the Knights, was walking in an elegant aristocratic manner. But this walk was meant to be anything but elegant, as anyone who came near him was instantly knocked large distances away right through several buildings, and others had their limbs ripped apart. He was not using his devil fruit powers, for it made no difference whether he did or not. He was the leader of the Knights of D for a reason, because he was the strongest. "Shiver in fear, world government. The Knights of D shall wipe you from this world," said Sabo in a cold tone. And looking high above the holy city was Dragon, watching the destruction of the Holy Land and his knights powerfully advance forward. "Go, Knights of D. Destroy all enemies of the Revolutionary Army," said Dragon, watching the chaos high above. A safe distance from the chaos were two royal families, the Neptune and Nefertari family. They, like everyone else, witnessed the beginning of the invasion when the 11 tornadoes struck the city. Then they saw the absolute chaos and carnage that followed. They saw several plant monsters and acid attacks that looked like monsters from a safe distance. They also saw that buildings were quickly being destroyed and explosions were everywhere. Blood and mangled bodies were present everywhere. It was like the sight of both a war and horror flick. It was chaotic and gruesome in every way possible. Both royal families and those they brought along were people who witnessed war before. Both kingdoms were threatened to be overthrown, and a war broke out in each. One was threatened by a criminal organization, the other by radical human-hating fishmen. But the war was nothing compared to what they were witnessing before them. Both saw war, both knew war, but what they saw and knew was absolutely nothing compared to what they were witnessing in front of them. Vivi was no stranger to unusual phenomena. Living in the Grand Line, she knew of the power of the devil fruits. Also traveling with the Straw Hats, she saw giants, dinosaurs, blossoms in the snow, powerful rubber men, three-sword-style swordsmen, liars with long noses, human reindeer hybrids. She saw a lot thanks to her nakama. Likewise, she was no stranger to war and death, having seen her people nearly kill each other in Alabasta. She also was no stranger to being in constant danger due to the threat of crocodile and baroque works. But even she could not describe what she saw in front of her. Despite all what she had seen during the baroque works incident, even she could not put words to describe the sheer chaos, anarchy and destruction before her. All she could do was put her hands on her mouth. "Just what on earth is this?" said Vivi, her hands covering her mouth and her face scared. She turned to her side to look at her new friend and little sister, the beautiful mermaid princess Shirahoshi. As bad as she was taking this, Shirahoshi was even worse off. Shirahoshi, unlike Vivi, was a sheltered child. This was not her fault, as it was due to Vanderdecken's relentless courtship. But despite being sheltered and timid, she was brave when it came down to it, willing to have herself crushed by a giant ship to save her people. Her sheltered life ended during the battle for Fishman Island, when she witnessed the true power of the Straw Hats, and showed strength even she didn't know she was capable of. Despite all this, even she was not prepared for what was happening in front her eyes right now. This invasion was different from the one the new fisherman pirates plotted. That one was about taking over Fisherman Island. This one was about destroying the Holy Land. Furthermore, the destructive power of the invaders far exceeded that of even the extremely powerful Straw Hat pirates. "Oh my God," was all that came out of Shirahoshi's mouth. Vivi, seeing Shirahoshi in such a state, hugged the little princess to calm her down in much the same way Nami did for her. She saw a lot of herself in her, and they both had much in common, including similar feelings for Luffy. Cobra, Shaka, Pell, Igaram, Koza, Neptune, Fukaboshi, Raboshi, Manboshi and the two ministers were not faring any better. The sheer utter destruction and mass carnage in front of them was too much even for them who were experienced people. Neptune looked at the destruction with a similar look of fear as when he saw Noah approaching Fishman Island. "What madness is this?" said Neptune in a state of shock. "Everyone, we have to get out of the city. If we stay here, we'll surely die," said Fukaboshi. "He's right. These invaders clearly have great power. We wouldn't have a chance against them," said Koza, agreeing to the eldest of the Neptune brothers. "That's next to impossible. The only way to leave Mariehawa is in the city itself. And right now it's being attacked. As much as I hate to admit it, leaving is pretty much impossible," said Pell. "Then perhaps it's best if we find a safe location in the city and stay there until all this is over," said Cobra. "I could fly ahead and look for a safe location for us to stay, my king," offered Pell. "No, that wouldn't work," said Fukaboshi. "What do you mean?" asked Pell. "These guys seem to be killing anyone or anything they find. If they find you, they'll undoubtedly kill you before you even find a place. And they're so strong you wouldn't have a chance against them," said Fukaboshi. Pell looked down, knowing he was right. He may have been one of the strongest in Alabasta, but compared to these guys, he was nothing. The invading army consists of truly unstoppable monsters. We should stick together and find a place to hide. "I for one do not want one of these nice humans to die," said Raboshi. "I agree with that," said Manaboshi. "Regardless of what we do, we have to at all costs avoiding meeting one of those guys. If just one of them find us, it's all over. We're dead," said Koza. Everyone knew he was right. These guys were clearly in a league of their own. Despite being small in number, they easily decimated all the world's government security forces. Even the extra security for this year's reverie did not seem to help the slightest. These guys were the absolute strongest. While they were running for shelter, they noticed someone in front of them, and they quickly recognized the person as one of the invaders. Immediately the fighters went into defensive positions, though they knew against an opponent like him, winning was impossible. "Your Highness, Vivi-sama, please leave at once," cried Shaka, who was in his jackal form. "Father, Shirahoshi, go, get out of here," shouted Fukaboshi. The two princesses were ready to start running when they got a good look at the invader who started walking towards. And they were shocked beyond belief. Not just them, but everyone. He was just a boy. However, it was clear that he was one of them and extraordinarily powerful. But that was not the shocking thing about him. The shocking thing was that they knew him. "It can't be," said Neptune. That was all Cobra could say. The two who were most shocked were none other than the two princesses themselves, who were closest to this attacker. Not only that, but this attacker inadvertently stole their hearts during a time when each of their lives was in major crisis. It was none other than their savior, the boy who helped them in their time of need. "Luffy-san," was all that came out of Vivi's mouth. "Luffy-sama," came out of Shirahoshi's mouth. The reunion of Luffy with Vivi and Shirahoshi. How will this play out? Find out next chapter. The action begins. Sorry if the chapter was very short, but it was more like an introduction to the invasion. This chapter just shows the knights unleash their respective powers on the world government. Also forgive me if this chapter isn't as high quality as the previous, but first, this is an introduction to the invasion. Also, I'm not experienced with writing action scenes. The scenes with Luffy, Shirahoshi and Vivi are next. The Luffy-Kuma moment will come soon, and finally the powerful Admirals Kazara and Akainu will debut. The battles with them would be ones to remember. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow the Unknown One Piece fan for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.